Princes decree justice, and from whom alone cometh all counsel, wisdom and understanding. We, thy unworthy servants, here gathered together in thy name, do most humbly beseech thee to send down thy heavenly wisdom from above, and direct and guide us in all our consultations. And grant that, we having thy fear always before our eyes, and laying aside all private interests, prejudices, and partial affections, the result of all our counsels may be to the glory of thy blessed name, the maintenance of true religion and justice, the safety, honor, and happiness of the Queen, the public weal, peace and tranquility of the island, and the uniting and knitting together of the hearts of all persons and estates within the same, in true Christian love and charity one towards another, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
City. Call of the roll.
Mrs. Holness, Mr. Bartlett, Mr. Holness, Dr. Clark, Dr. Chang, Mr. Montague, Mr. Shaw, Mr. Samuda, Mr. Mackenzie, Ms. Grange, Mrs. Williams, Mrs. Malahoo Fort, Mr. Charles, Dr. Tufton, Mr. Green, Mr. Chuck, Mr. Vaz, Mr. Warmington, Mr. Hutchinson, Mr. Terry Long, Mr. Main, Mrs. Cuthbert Flynn, Dr. Dunn, Mr. Morgan, Mr. Davis, Ms. Smith, Mr. Brown, Dr. Brownberg, Dr. Charles, Mr. Chin, Mr. Clark, Mr. Cousins, Ms. Crawford, Ms. Daly, Ms. Davies, Mr. Golding, Mr. Graham, Dr. Guy, Mr. Montague, Ms. Hamilton, Ms. Hannah, Mr. Henry Kitts, Mr. Henry, Mr. Hilton, Mr. Jackson, Mr. Lawrence, Ms. Lee, Mr. Miller, Ms. Morrison, Ms. Nita, Mr. Paulwell, Mr. Phillips, Dr. Phillips, Mr. Robertson, Mr. Robinson, Mr. Sibbles, Mr. Slowly, Mrs. Vaz, Dr. Wheatley, Mr. Williams, Mr. Wilson, Mr. Witter, Mr. Wright, Mr. Warmington, Mr. Chuck, Mr. Golding,
Mr. Witter.
Yeah, Mr. Witter answered.
Members, the Armistice Day, signaling the end of World War I, was signed on the 11th of November 1918 at 11 a.m. It therefore means that Sunday, November 8th, 2020, marked 102 years since the armistice was signed. The first actual Poppy Day was held in Britain on November 11, 1921. Today, as members of Parliament, we are lending our support to the Jamaica Legion to show that we care and recognize the sacrifice they made in the past that resulted in the freedom we now enjoy today. The Jamaica Legion representative is retired Regimental Sergeant Major, Warrant Officer Class 1, Martin Spaulding of the Jamaica Defense Force, who is here to take us through the drills. House Leader.
Madam Speaker, I beg to move that the meeting of this House be suspended briefly to enable the members to pay tribute to fallen soldiers and veterans of World Wars I and II.
Is it the wish of the House that the meeting be suspended for the purpose outlined by the Leader of the House? Those in favor, those against? The ayes have it. I will now invite members to observe a minute silent as Warrant Officer Class 1 Martin Spaulding, a retired member of the Jamaica Defense Force and a member of the Jamaica Legion, will do the exhortation. Will you stand for a minute's silence?
Lord,
a minute's silence.
Lord God of hosts, lest we forget. They shall grow not old, as we are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. As the going down of the sun, in the morning, we will remember them.
You may be seated. We want to thank Mr. Spaulding for taking us through this ceremony and at the same time ask all our members to give generously to this cause. Members, before we begin this sitting, I want, on behalf of all of us and for myself personally, to congratulate the member from St. Andrews Southern, Mark Golding, on his success at the polls on Saturday. And I know he has now received his instrument as leader of the opposition and the 6th president of the People's National Party. Congratulations. Statements by ministers.
Madam Speaker, we anticipate that there will be 3 statements today. The Most Honorable Prime Minister will make a statement. The Minister of Education, true to her undertaking last week, will make her statement this week, and the Minister of Agriculture and Fisheries, the Honorable Floyd Green. Madam Speaker, may it please you to invite the Minister of Education, Youth and Information to make her statement at this time.
Madam Speaker, you having so graciously acknowledged the appointment of the new Leader of the Opposition, I'm sure you will allow him a moment to say thanks.
I need some roads. Okay.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It is with a great sense of humility that I have today received the instrument of appointment as Leader of the Opposition. It is an auspicious occasion, as it is on this very date in 1968 that the Right Excellent Norman Washington Manley, national hero of Jamaica and first president of the party, which I have now the honor to lead, gave his valedictory address to the party. In a similar vein, Madam Speaker, last Saturday, 7th of November 2020, I had the honor of being elevated to the presidency of the People's National Party on the very same day that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris won the US election. I wish to congratulate President-elect Biden and Vice President-elect Harris on their historic victory. For us in Jamaica, it has particular significance because Kamala Harris's strong connection to Jamaica is of significance, her father being one of us. I urge the government to find a suitable way of honoring her in keeping with the immense national pride and joy that her electoral success has brought to our people. Madam Speaker, I am grateful to all who had the trust and confidence in me to provide this opportunity to serve my beloved country, Jamaica, in this new role. First and foremost, I must express profound gratitude to our outgoing Leader of the Opposition, the member for East Central St. Andrew, for his tremendous career of service to the nation and for the mentorship and advice he has bestowed on me, both when we were in government together and since I entered this House. Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, the opposition provides a critical check and balance to the use of state power by the government. In Parliament, we must uphold our oath to defend the Constitution of Jamaica and always protect the interests of the Jamaican people. In carrying out this sacred duty, we will not oppose for its own sake, but always with the objective of strengthening good governance and accountability in the affairs of the nation. We will seek to be constructive in our words and deeds. At the same time, we will be fearless and unrelenting in the face of corruption or maladministration wherever it arises. And we will be vigilant in protecting the rights of our people and the future of our country. Now more than ever, Madam Speaker, our nation needs a strong and responsible opposition. Though our numbers here in this House are relatively small, we little but we talawa. We must be cohesive, prepared, and strategic as we stand up for the Jamaican people and perform our parliamentary duties. We must reach out to civil society and the wider public for support where important issues of principle are at stake and the government is, in our view, going down the wrong road. Madam Speaker, I assume this office at a time when our country is facing unprecedented hardship. The COVID pandemic has already cost over 220 lives in Jamaica, most of them in the past 2 months. The pandemic has also resulted in a sharp slowdown in the economy, which is projected to suffer negative growth of approximately 8% this year. Jamaica is now in a deep recession, and unemployment has spiked from just over 7% to over 12%, which is an increase of over 50% this year. In the face of this national crisis, we must embrace bipartisanship wherever it is in the best interests of the Jamaican people. However, we note that the Parliamentary Committee on COVID that was established earlier in the year stopped meeting before the recent general election, and despite the intensification of the public health crisis since the election, that committee has not been reconstituted. As a result, the opposition no longer has an inclusive voice in strategizing with the government in response to the pandemic crisis. I invite the government to reconsider the exclusion of the opposition in that way. On a similar note, Madam Speaker, the matter of reinstating the role of opposition members to chair select committees of Parliament remains unresolved. That convention was first implemented by former Prime Minister, Most Honourable Bruce Golding, in 2007, and it continued through 3 successive administrations until this current one. The Prime Minister's decision to depart from the convention and have government members chair all but 2 of the sessional committees has weakened parliamentary oversight of the executive. Calls have been made by civil society and the media to restore the convention, along with useful suggestions to strengthen the process. I urge the Prime Minister once again to reconsider this matter and to reinstate opposition chairmanship of the sessional committees. Madam Speaker, I raise these issues at a time when the national crisis has further intensified. The heavy rains of the past 2 weeks have caused massive devastation to many parts of our island and the rural economy, with farmers bearing the brunt of the losses and the country's road infrastructure taking an awful beating. Some communities are cut off as we speak, and it is especially hard on the poor and vulnerable at this time. Indeed, some families have lost their homes. I use this opportunity to call for swift assistance to those most in need. The government must move quickly to clear blocked roads and remedy breakaways that have cut off important means of access. It is vital that any blocked drains and gullies be cleared quickly, as more rain is forecasted as likely in the coming days. I also appeal for persons who own heavy equipment to demonstrate the true Jamaican spirit of love and care for each other, to help in the effort to clear roads and drains. Indeed, Madam Speaker, for all of us, this is a time to reach out to those in need and lay a helping hand and to raise them up where they may be in need of assistance. Amidst the hardships and crisis now afflicting the nation, the opposition must present a beacon of hope to lift the spirits of the Jamaican people. We must ready ourselves to provide an alternative to the country when the winds of change catch the nation's sails. I humbly and gratefully commit to serving as leader of opposition effectively and resolutely with my team of opposition members of Parliament and supported by all members in the Senate. Jamaica needs a robust and effective opposition at this time, and as the new opposition leader, it will be done. Thank you, Madam Speaker. God bless Jamaica, land we love. Thank you.
Statements by ministers. Yes.
Warming.
You're on the subject of statement by minister. We need to confine ourselves to the standing order. Because in my many years here, I came in 1980, I've never heard. You're not coming on. Tony on it. I've never heard of a statement by a new leader of opposition when it said statement by ministers. We need to confine ourselves to the standing order. Okay? He made a statement and he was going all over the place. But I blame the leader of opposition business who got up and asked you to allow him to speak. I believe the leader of opposition business should protect his new leader from his own self. He needs to protect the leader from his own self.
I want to thank you. I want to thank you and to note that in his response, the new leader of the opposition was indeed lengthy. However, as the Speaker, I felt it my duty, because he received his instrument today, to note that as a parliament with a government and an opposition, that we congratulate him on his new appointment, which to me is the correct way for us to go as a parliament. Thank you. Statements by ministers.
Madam Speaker, may it please you now to ask the Minister of Education, Youth and Information to make a statement.
Madam Speaker, in bringing this update of the education sector today, I begin with great sadness on the deaths of 4 of our children over the past few days. Jade Ann McLean, 13-year-old student who attended Brownstown High School, daughter of Cadian Howard. Rihanna Howard, 14-year-old student who attended Marcus Garvey Technical High School, died along with their relatives, Cadian Howard, 34-year-old sister of Rihanna, and Jason Gale, the husband of Cadian Howard. 9-year-old Alifia Timbawala of St. Jude's Primary died on Saturday from leukemia. 5-year-old DeAndre Jaden Peterkin from Flanker St. James, who died in a fire. He was a student of Providence Basic School. Our sincerest condolences to the families. The Ministry of Education, Youth and Information has been in touch with families to offer psychosocial support, and condolence letters are being prepared. Madam Speaker, death of our children is never easy, and so we mourn for these children as though they were our own. In fact, Madam Speaker, they are our own children, our nation's children. May their souls rest in peace. Madam Speaker, I will make a statement on 2 topics. The first one is the phased resumption of school for face-to-face, and the second topic is the ministry's Own Your Own Device program. I will begin with the phased resumption of schools. Madam Speaker, this morning, 15 schools reopened for face-to-face under a pilot program that will allow us to gain confidence in having our students and teachers back in the physical classroom as we live through this COVID-19 pandemic. Yellows High School in St. Thomas asked to be opened tomorrow because they have been dealing with flooding on the school grounds. Additionally, Moortown Primary and Junior High School in Portland also asked to be open tomorrow as a result of dealing with some issues as well. The 17 schools are Stairtown Primary and Junior High in St. Anne, Somerton All-Age and Infant School, St. James, Newcomb Valley Primary School, St. Elizabeth, Morgan's Forest Primary and Infant in Clarendon, Mile Gully Primary School in Manchester, Kemps Hill High School in Clarendon, Gargoli Primary and Junior High also in Clarendon, Chatsworth Primary and Infant School, St. James. And while I'm calling these names, you will notice that there are some pictures that were sent to us today that are being shown on the screen as to what it looked like on the ground, how the students came into school, and so on. So there's Chatsworth Primary and Infant School in St. James, Chantilly Primary School in Westmoreland, Bethlehem All-Age and Infant School in St. Elizabeth, Ballards Valley Primary School also in St. Elizabeth, Alston High School in Clarendon, Moortown Primary and Junior High School in Portland, Chalky Hill All-Age in St. Anne, Devon Primary in Manchester, Monique Primary and Junior High also in St. Anne, and Yallis High School in St. Thomas. In preparation for the phased resumption of face-to-face learning, the ministry activated its processes with principals. At a meeting held on November 6, 2020, principals gave the assurance that they were ensuring that their schools were fully prepared for the reopening on Monday, November 9th. As you heard, this reopening was delayed by a day given the prevailing weather conditions over the past weekend and the challenges dealing with flooding in some areas. All schools received a satisfactory inspection from the Ministry of Health and Wellness. Madam Speaker, through our regional directors, we received reports that the parents and teachers have expressed support for the pilot initiative, and some were physically present at the school assisting with the preparatory activities. Madam Speaker, accommodations have been made for teachers and students with comorbidities. So, for example, the teacher with comorbidity or other issues would stay at home and provide the lessons remotely with the help of another teacher in the classroom. Psychosocial sessions have commenced for the students, and we will continue to ensure that the fears and anxieties of the stakeholders are addressed. Furniture for schools have been delivered to ensure the observance of the social distancing protocol, and any old or obsolete items were removed from the school grounds. The schools will have a staggered resumption with different year groups reporting on different days. The high schools and a few of the primary schools will utilize the rotational approach guided by the blended learning model. Madam Speaker, the ministry has also put in place a rigorous program to assist in the monitoring and evaluation of the pilot of the 17 schools reopened for face-to-face classes. The tools include monitoring and evaluation plan, monitoring and evaluation visitation schedule for the data collectors, school resumption observation schedule and checklist, principal interview schedule, and protocol for administering data collection instrument. This evaluation will be conducted to determine the extent to which the reopening of 17 schools during the COVID-19 pandemic for a period of 2 weeks was done efficiently. It aims to facilitate evidence-based decision-making to determine the successes and highlight further considerations that need to be given to the full and/or partial resumption of face-to-face instruction for the education system as a whole. For the purpose of this evaluation, the Ministry's Planning and Development Division will seek responses from all students and teaching staff in these 17 schools using electronic questionnaires. The questionnaires will be shared through the ministry-provided email addresses, the regional school improvement officers, supervisor education officers, and general education officers. The population of students and teachers that attend face-to-face classes will be targeted for response. Parents of students will be asked to be present when students complete the questionnaire. All 17 schools will be visited by data collectors, and the 17 principals or vice principals will be interviewed. A mixed method approach is being utilized. Data collectors will collect both quantitative and qualitative type data for monitoring purposes that will inform the progress of the initiative and will inform the evaluation at the end of the 2 weeks. Officers from the Planning and Development Division will participate in the active monitoring exercises to provide systematic feedback at different intervals within the 2-week period. Madam Speaker, to increase the reliability ratio of the judgments made, inter-rater reliability is required in the form of 2 simultaneous observers. In the meantime, Madam Speaker, the 3 approaches, which are the online, audiovisual, and the learning kits, will continue to be utilized by all schools, including the 17 schools, if so needed. The Ministry of Education, Youth and Information remains committed to ensuring that no child is left behind. Madam Speaker, I will now turn to the second topic, which is the Own Your Own Device Incentive Program. I'd like to share with members the procedures for the distribution of tablets and laptop vouchers for the new Own Your Own Device Incentive Program. The Ministry of Education, Youth and Information has developed a voucher incentive program for students who are in need but are not on path. The program is called the Own Your Own Device Incentive Program. The Government of Jamaica, through the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information, has been utilizing technology to enrich and improve the educational levels of its students and move towards a fully connected and knowledge-based society. This incentivized program will support the goals of the Government of Jamaica's Vision 2030 outcomes to develop world-class education and training, a technology-enabled society, and an internationally competitive ICT industry structure. The Own Your Own Device program is in keeping with the Ministry's Bring Your Own Device policy, which outlines the specifications for laptops or tablets to be purchased. The Own Your Own Device Incentive Program seeks to benefit an estimated 36,000 needy students in primary and secondary schools across the island. A selection mechanism has been proposed to make the determination regarding the 36,000 needy students who are not on path. So I will outline, Madam Speaker, the criteria for selection. Parents or guardians can apply through an established website powered by eGov Jamaica or via a manual numbered application form available from their respective members of parliament or the ministry's regional offices. The website to use is oyod.educate.gov.jm and will begin accepting applications on November 17, 2020. The application process will close on December 4, 2020. The distribution of the manual numbered application form by the Member of Parliament will commence on November 17 as well. The information via the website and the manual numbered application form will be verified to ensure the integrity of the application process and that there's no duplication of applications or devices to any one student. Verification of students' information will be done by way of the electronic National Student Registration System. Verification of TRN numbers and other information about parents or guardians will be done by way of the Tax Administration's database. Madam Speaker, the following is the protocol for the electronic and manual numbered application form distribution. Each member of Parliament will receive 250 manually numbered application forms in sequence. Application forms should only be distributed to parents of students who are not on path. All areas of the form must be completed. Forms must not be copied or reprinted. Forms copied or reprinted will be rejected, as these will not bear the security feature. Information from the application form must be uploaded on the oyod.educate.gov.jm website before December 4, 2020. In the unlikely event that a parent or guardian is unable to upload the information from the application form, the parent or guardian can send the form to the Ministry of Education at the following address. So, to the attention of Own Your Own Device Program, 2 to 4 National Heroes Circle, Building 1, Kingston 4. Each form will be processed electronically. Therefore, all forms must be uploaded. A reference number will be sent via SMS and email to the phone number and or the email address provided by the parent or guardian upon submission of the application, and this can be used for tracking purposes. Once the information is verified, an electronic voucher will be submitted to the email address or the SMS provided by the parent or guardian upon the approval of the incentive. The e-voucher will serve as proof of eligibility for the incentive program. Parents or guardians are asked to visit an approved vendor, and this information will be provided to complete the purchase of a tablet or laptop utilizing the e-voucher. Of note, the value of the e-voucher is $20,000. Parents or guardians will be responsible for the difference in the cost of the laptop or tablet. Parents or guardians must present a valid ID when claiming this incentive. The e-voucher will be valid for 6 months. Queries in relation to this program can be made by calling 888-OYOD now or 888-696-3669. Weekdays between the hours of 9 a.m. and 4 p.m. or email to oyod@moey.gov.jm. Let me add, Madam Speaker, that the Ministry has written to the Auditor General requesting an assessment of the process to ensure the highest level of compliance. Madam Speaker, we are endeavoring to make as many of our Jamaican children as possible have access to devices to help them into the transition to the online learning and 21st century realities. Students who come of age in the 21st century in which we are living need to be taught different skills than those learned by students in the 20th century, and that the skills they learn should reflect the specific demands that will be placed upon them in a complex, competitive, knowledge-based, information age, technology-driven economy and society. So, Madam Speaker, we must equip that 10-year-old today who will be the 20-year-old in 2030 the year in which all of us are working towards having Jamaica become a first world country. It begins with our students, Madam Speaker. We have to equip our students to be ready for that knowledge-based, information age, technology-driven economy and society. Thank you.
Bobby, you know it's been a pain in the mind. Permission. Madam Speaker, I'm assuming that this has been my seat placed once we are here. So thank you for the permission to speak, Madam Speaker. But they are long enough not to follow you. Madam Speaker, it's sometimes a little difficult to gather my thoughts and to actually speak as I should with some of the interruptions that I am faced with. I am trying, Madam Speaker, but you understand how difficult it is. Thank you very much. Madam Speaker, as I said last week, I really had expected a statement last week, but I'll accept it this week very graciously in terms of what is presented. Madam Speaker, the presentation dealt with two issues. One was the pilot program with the phased resumption of face-to-face activities in schools, and the second was around the Own Your Own Device program. So let me speak first of all as it relates to the pilot program to resume face-to-face activities. As I have said here and elsewhere, I have...
members, please, there's a loud hum.
As I have said here and elsewhere, we have absolutely no objection to the resumption of face-to-face activities in our schools. The problem, of course, is always how we do it. And I have listened and read what the minister has said in terms of the other stakeholders that have been part of the discussion. The one thing I want to say about consultation, Minister, is that over the years as government, locally, we really have come to equate the lowest form of consultation with what we mean when we speak about public consultation. So consultation takes place on what we call a ladder, which means that at the lowest rung of the ladder is the case where you speak to individuals and you tell them what you're doing and they have the information. At the highest rung of that ladder of consultation is a process where everyone is at the table, information flows in both directions, and the stakeholders become co-creators and co-owners of the decisions that are being made. I must confess that from my own experience in community development and in engaging stakeholders in issues around these, I would much rather see us move from the lowest rung of the ladder when we talk about consultation. And I want to commend that to the minister in terms of how the decisions are made. In the very beginning, I had received a number of comments and I had a lot of interactions with parents and teachers who were extremely surprised to have heard that their school was involved in the pilot program. I note the ministry's explanation that some of the information got out before it was ready to be shared, and therefore that might have been responsible for some of the chaos, some of the slight, and some of the anxiety that individuals would have felt. I still believe that in terms of how we come to these decisions, that I'd love to see far more transparency than currently obtains. And what do I mean by that? I mean that if there are variables that are in a matrix that will determine whether or not schools are ready or able to be open and to have face-to-face activities, I believe that metrics need to be known. I believe that those variables need to be known. I believe that when you look at other places, whether it is what is happening in the community, whether it is an audit of the students who live in that area or the schools from which the schools and where the children come from, but we need a framework that is more widely known. In other places, what one does is that the metrics is developed, and then you look to see the schools that fit the criteria. This almost seems to be done the other way around, that you identify some schools, you do the pilot, and then you're seeking to see how that works.
Member, I'm not disturbing you and I'm not stopping you. I'm just alerting you that you have gone 5 minutes, which is the time allotted, and you have reached your second thing. So I'm just allotting you that time has run out and is running out.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Your assistance is most welcome, and your guidance. So I wanted to place that on the table for the consideration of the Minister. The On Your Own device is an excellent initiative, and I believe that it is one that is noteworthy. The inclusion of the members of Parliament raises some questions about how it is to be done. I am pleased to see that there are clear deadlines, which means that tomorrow there should be no lines at the MP's offices seeking any of these 250 forms, because you have clearly outlined a timeline during which it should be done. But a couple of questions arise. One, what happens when parents have more than one child who would be eligible for the program? Would they be prevented from including all the children that would qualify? The other is that we speak about the neediest students, and I note that the criteria really has no limiting factors. I think it will be important for us to understand when the information is verified, what is being looked at for the verification, so that we can make sure that the individuals who should be receiving the forms are in fact the ones who are receiving. I also was wondering, all constituencies are not the same. Some are far smaller than others. Others are much larger and more populous. And this 250 forms across the board, I am wondering how that plays out for those constituencies where we have far more children that could fall within the target age range or in terms of the economic circumstances. So those are two things. I'm pleased to see that it is not just the online, but there's also SMS. But Minister, sometimes we forget that as simple as an SMS message might seem, there are some parents who are simply unable to send or receive, right? So is there any other option in terms of taking a form in and in terms of receiving a response without, if you don't have a device at all? So those are the questions that I would want to pose. Thank you very much. I wasn't paying no mind.
All right. I note your comments with regards to consultations, and I'd love for you to know that the ministry had many meetings. One with the e-COVID task force. We've had meetings with the JTA. We've had meetings with principals. We've had meetings with regional heads. We've had press conference, and at some of these meetings, the variables were talked about, and I believe by now the variables should be known, and they include the vulnerability of communities, and this is data that we would have gotten from the Ministry of Health and Wellness, the incidence of COVID in the community. At the school itself, we looked at things like adequacy of water, the distance children have to travel from school, whether or not the schools were inspected by the Ministry of Health. We looked at the internet at the school, whether there was internet, and if there was, what's the reliability of that. And in the area of water, we looked to see if there was a tank, if there was piped water. If they got piped water, were they subject to lock-offs, and so on. So there were many variables that went into this in order to help us to determine which of the schools would pass, all the criteria that we have. We believe it to have been a very robust process that we went through, and that consultations happened at different levels. With regards to your question about the own your own device and what if there is a parent with more than one child. Our intention for this program is to ensure that 36,000 families get a device in the home. There are other initiatives that are underway. One, you might have heard of the One Laptop Per Child initiative, and those distributions, when they come, they will be looking for different sets of students, and in those instances, homes will begin to get more than one device for the students that are in the homes. But the objective of this particular program is to ensure that there's at least one device in the home. And in terms of verification, we will be looking at, we want to target those families that are earning $300,000 and below. And we'll be utilizing the database of the TAJ to help us to decide on that. And that's why we're asking parents or guardians to give us their TRN, their birth date, their name, much like the COVID Compassionate Grant did. And that information will be checked to ensure that we have someone who can be verified. In terms of if a parent or guardian is not able to upload the information or get the SMS, then the last resort would be the ministry, to contact the ministry. And we've given a phone number, email address, and a physical address for the ministry.
Madam Speaker, if I could just ask the Minister a couple of questions. Minister, I noticed that the applications may be made either through the established website, powered by eGov, or via the manual numbered application form. And I think you said 36,000 students are to benefit from this. And I think 15,750 forms will be distributed among the MPs. So there's about 20,250 that won't go through the MP system. If you have a vastly greater demand than the supply, what criteria will be applied in determining who gets and who doesn't get the $20,000 voucher for a tablet or a laptop? And in terms of the MPs, is there any guidance as to what ought to be the methodology for deciding who gets these 250, other than the fact that the beneficiaries must not be on path? But apart from that, is there any other guidance that we are being encouraged to follow in distributing these forms? So it's really two questions. One is, what was the ministry's position as to how the MPs ought to deal with the distribution, given that it's very likely that the demand will vastly exceed 250 in any given constituency. And secondly, what criteria will the ministry apply in deciding who gets and who doesn't get if the number of applications, including the online applications that are directly uploaded, exceed 36,000 in total? Thank you.
All right. So a primary criteria would be income less than $300,000 for the year. And this information would be information that the THA would have on its database. So the TRN is key, and there are some other questions that we asked. So it's primarily an income verification approach that we will be using. And then your question about what to say to the MPs. You know, when we thought of doing this initially, I wanted to do it 100% electronic, so it allowed people to kind of decide on their own based on this income criteria. But then some MPs insisted that, you know, especially rural MPs, that their persons might not have access, and so that's why we went to the paper format, even though we really didn't want to do paper. So it is my sense that MPs know who the needy families are in their constituencies, and you just have to make your best judgment. Together you could, you know, ask the principals at schools as well, they would know, and you kind of use your best judgment as to who the needy families are. And I'm sure you know them, who they are in your constituency. Okay.
Madam Speaker, just one question to the Minister. The issue that I face in my constituency is my students' inability to access the internet. And I'm just wondering if these devices could be enabled for a SIM card and for the government to, per month, indicate an amount that would be permitted. Because without that, Madam Speaker, you're giving youngsters devices that they're going to be playing games with. If you're not able to connect to the internet, it really is going to go to waste. Is the government contemplating subsidizing the cost of internet connectivity to these devices?
Okay, so a member, having sat in the chair at the Ministry of Science, Energy and Technology for as many years as you did, I'm sure now in 2020, looking back, you probably wish you had accelerated internet connectivity. But here we are in 2020. No, but just to say, member, that the Ministry of Education, Youth and Information has stepped forward to bear the cost of students and teachers who log on to the learning management system, right? So there should be no cost to the student or the teacher once they access the Google Suite learning management system, which is where teachers create virtual classrooms for them to meet the students and so on. There should be no cost. And if there is that cost, we would like to know, because the ministry is paying the providers for that. Additionally, there are well over 125 different educational websites for which the students and teachers should not be paying again for for connectivity. They should not be paying a data plan. So we recognize that data plans are expensive. So that's one way that the government has stepped forward to reduce the costs to parents and teachers. Additionally, we've been in conversations with the providers to ask them to just lower the price point of their data plans to students. So instead of going out with a data plan for $500 for whatever length of time, bring that down to $300 or $200 or $100 to help the students who can't afford that $500 upfront all at once at the same time. So it's not perfect, but I think we've taken many steps to get our students in the mode and mindset of beginning this journey towards the digital society. So while COVID has presented an opportunity for us to use online, it's not just about COVID and living through COVID. It's beyond that. It's to take this country on the path towards being a digital society. COVID has helped us to accelerate that and significantly increased the adoption level and the mindset of our students, parents, and teachers towards this digital society.
Just one more question, Madam Speaker. As the Minister, as all MPs can appreciate, 250 tablets or laptops will be a drop in the bucket. And the Minister did allude to my own tenure when we were able to develop a fund of $13 billion to enable universal service and, in fact, distributed 25,000 tablets. Yes, you can tell me better where they are. But, Minister, is there any way out of those funds can these numbers be increased to facilitate members of Parliament doing at least 500 tablets?
Okay. All right. So Minister, Member Golden, to your right, gave you some numbers, all right? He worked it out. He saw that using the paper forms, X number went to the MPs, but then you had a much bigger number of people who can do it online. There's nothing to prevent you from directing persons online as well. The paper was just to facilitate those MPs or in the rural areas.
Madam Speaker, the Minister of Agriculture and Fisheries will now make a statement.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Let me start by acknowledging our Permanent Secretary at the Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries, Permanent Secretary Dermot Spence, who should be in the precinct today with us, and also the team from RADA. They've really worked hard, Madam Speaker, despite the challenging circumstances, to craft what I'm going to present to the House today. Madam Speaker, as I had promised last week, I had indicated that I would update Parliament in relation to the impact of the rains on our agricultural sector, and the statement should be distributed as I speak, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, over the past several weeks, Jamaica has been experiencing very poor weather conditions, which have been influenced by significant weather systems, most recently hurricanes Zeta and Eta. Cabinet, Madam Speaker, was updated last week in relation to the blow that the continuous torrential rainfall has had on the agricultural sector. I now wish to address the House by providing an update on the response of this government to the continued flooding across the island, with the parishes who have showed the greatest evidence of damage: St. Catherine, St. Andrew, St. Thomas, Clarendon, and Manchester and St. Elizabeth. Madam Speaker, I've spent the last 2 weeks visiting a number of our farmers across the most affected parishes. In fact, we have gone to Bog Hole in Clarendon, Mason River, Douglas Castle over in St. Anne, gone down into South Manchester to the Dove House area. We've been across South St. Elizabeth. We've been into St. Catherine, and we are planning to go to St. Thomas on Friday. And, Madam Speaker, the word that comes to mind is that the rains has truly had a devastating impact on our farmers. In fact, Madam Speaker, some 2,955 hectares of crops have been lost, with an economic value of some $2.5 billion, affecting over 14,181 farmers. The crops that suffered most, Madam Speaker, are vegetable crops, including tomatoes, cucumbers, cabbage, lettuce, a lot of our condiments, our scallion, sweet peppers, our plantain, and a lot of our fruits, our vine fruits, our melons, our cantaloupes. In fact, when we looked at the first week of heavy rains and we went out, we were happy that a lot of our tubers were not in bad condition. However, Madam Speaker, with the impact of the continued rainfall into last week, we're now seeing significant loss across Irish potato and sweet potato. Our livestock farmers have not been spared. In fact, our poultry farmers have lost an estimated value of about $12 million, largely across broilers and layers. Our beef farmers have lost about $10 million, with over 295 colonies being lost by 60 farmers. The rains have negatively impacted 60 dairy and beef cattle farmers with a loss value of $6.8 million. And we have seen the loss of over 350 pigs and small ruminants valued at some $7.5 million. Overall, Madam Speaker, our livestock sector suffered losses amounting to $38 million, with 780 farmers being affected. We've also seen significant infrastructure damage, such as farm roads, drains, protected structures like greenhouses and catchment areas. In relation to the infrastructure damage, that assessment, Madam Speaker, is ongoing. As you would be aware, unfortunately, some of the areas are still inaccessible, but we already have a preliminary estimate of $140 million. As such, Madam Speaker, the reality is that these rains could not have come at a worse possible time. Having drought for the last few years, then with the downturn in COVID-19 in relation to the market, and now the droughts, and now the significant rainfall. But, Madam Speaker, our farmers are resilient. And one of the takeaways from my tours is that they are not daunted. Despite the challenges, they are willing to go back out into the field and to do what they love. In fact, Madam Speaker, our farmers are our food heroes and should be celebrated. What they now need, Madam Speaker, is the government, private sector, various NGO support agencies to stand with them. And I'm here to say to our farmers that this government will stand by our farmers. As such, Madam Speaker, I will now outline a program of immediate intervention that the ministry has been able to craft through a reallocation of its resources to provide immediate relief to the sector. While we have been able to do that, Madam Speaker, I signaled from very early that we will sit with the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service to see what additional support can be provided to our farmers so that we can return to acceptable levels of productivity. The mechanism of the support will be coordinated through the following avenues. RADA, or Members of Parliament, a program to rehabilitate infrastructure, and through public-private partnership. Madam Speaker, our support will be focused in the parishes which experience the greatest loss. Those include Manchester, St. Elizabeth, St. Catherine, St. Thomas, Clarendon, and St. Andrew. In relation to accessing the support, these are the following ways that it can be accessed by our farmers. Our RADA extension officers have been dispatched to identify the areas and the farmers who are most significantly impacted. These farmers are now advised to follow up with their extension officers and parish offices in order to access the benefits that will be outlined. The farmers will be required to complete a beneficiary assessment form, and they will follow the instructions given by their RADA officers to get the requisite benefit through selected farm stores. As I am quite aware that there has been a significant call on our members of Parliament, we will also be providing some direct support through the members of Parliament. I will say now, Madam Speaker, that my model in relation to direct support focuses on equity and not equality. As such, we have 3 tiers under which support will be provided. We will provide $500,000 to 20 MPs who have been categorized as urban MPs. We will provide $1 million to 20 MPs who have been categorized as rural MPs. And we will provide $1.5 million each to 21 MPs in the hardest hit areas. Total support, Madam Speaker, amounts through the MPs to $64.5 million. But Madam Speaker, that is just a portion of the support that we will provide. We will be embarking on a backyard gardening program, Madam Speaker, to spread the support to our households and to also ensure that we are focusing on food security. As such, we will launch our Say Yes to Fresh backyard gardening program, through which the ministry is providing $10 million to provide 2,500 households across Jamaica with backyard gardening farming kits. Madam Speaker, the initiatives and our support intervention will be focused on the following areas. The ministry will be providing direct support to farmers in the form of a pesticide program. The chemicals to be distributed include fungicides, herbicides, and insecticides to combat current and expected heavy infestations due to continuous rainfall. This program is valued at $95 million. Madam Speaker, assorted seeds and other planting material will be provided to the tune of $215 million. These inputs will be provided to open field farmers as well as greenhouse producers whose growing fields and covered vegetation has been partially or completely wiped out. Madam Speaker, the nutrition of several crops would have been compromised due to the level of leaching of soil nutrients that has taken place. As an immediate intervention, the ministry has allocated $30 million towards badly needed fertilizer to assist in replenishing the nutrition to aid rapid crop recovery. We also, Madam Speaker, will be redeploying our tractor services to the affected areas so that farmers can get back into production as soon as the weather permits and that field conditions are favorable. A minimum of 2 tractors will be made available to the worst affected areas. Madam Speaker, the damage to our farm roads has been severe. And so, under our current farm road program, we will be doing 17 roads valued at approximately $111 million across the affected parishes. Additionally, the ministry has immediately isolated some $100 million to be redistributed to rehabilitate farm roads in other affected areas. Madam Speaker, we are determined that our food security is paramount, and so one element of our quick recovery strategy will include the allocation of some $40 million to urgently repair greenhouses and shade houses that have been damaged to get farmers back into production. We will be also conducting repairs to catchment areas such as ponds and reservoirs so as to provide a sustainable water source for our farmers and farmers groups. We are not leaving out our bee farmers, Madam Speaker, and we will provide support in the amount of $5 million to assist in the restoration of colonies which have been destroyed and to provide an alternative source of feed for bees who have been unable to forage during the continuous periods of rain. In relation to our other livestock, to include pigs and small ruminants, we will be providing $20 million as support through the registered organizations. Madam Speaker, we could not walk this road alone. And as such, over the last few weeks, I have been on an outreach along with the Permanent Secretary to our various partners across the agricultural sector for them to support this recovery effort. Over the year, the ministry has partnered with several input suppliers in the further development of the sector for continued support to the farmers. This challenging period is no different, as a number of our private sector partners who are input suppliers have come on board and have pledged their support to the rebuilding of the sector. The value of their contribution, Madam Speaker, is $30.3 million. And we express appreciation to the following suppliers: H&L Agro, St. Jago Farm Store, Caribbean Broilers, Jamaica Broilers, Newport First and Jamaica Limited, and Agchem Plant Limited. Madam Speaker, the support from the ministry at this critical time now stands at $636.9 million, with $616.9 million as direct support from government and $30.3 million from our private partners. And I know it is a lot, Madam Speaker, so let me just quickly break it down. From the ministry, we will be providing seed and planting materials valued at $215 million, chemical, fungicide, pesticide, and herbicide valued at $95 million, fertilizer valued at $30 million, for a total of $340 million towards our crops. In relation to infrastructure, we will be providing $211.6 million to look at our farm road program and $40 million to rehabilitate greenhouses, shade houses, and catchment areas. In relation to livestock, we'll be helping our apiculture sector with $5 million and small ruminants and pigs for $20 million, a total of $25 million. So the ministry's intervention will be $616.6 million. In relation to our private sector partners, they will be providing baby chicks for $2.2 million from the Jamaica Broilers Group, baby chicks for $2.2 million from the Caribbean Broilers Group, feed with $1.9 million from the Jamaica Broilers Group, fertilizer of $2 million from the Newport Ferguson Group, input supplies, fertilizer, herbicide, insecticide of $3 million from the H&L Agri Group, a discount package of 30% that will run until the end of December from the H&L Agri Group, input supplies of seeds and chemicals from AgChem of $10 million, and care packages amounting to $7.5 million from St. Jago Farms, amounting to $30.3 million. So overall, Madam Speaker, this government has coordinated an emergency relief program for our farmers of $636.9 million.
646 and 30 million, not 20.3.
No, yeah. Madam Speaker, in closing, we have heard the cries of our farmers. This government remains resolute in ensuring that our farmers have the support they need to provide the guarantee for our food security. This challenge is not beyond us, Madam Speaker. We have done it before, and we will do it again. The strategies and support planned by this ministry is aimed at bringing back stability to ensure the prosperity of our farmers and the prosperity of our country. We continue to support our farmers who continue to face risk due to weather-related events of droughts and floods. And we are confident, Madam Speaker, that together we will recover stronger. God bless you.
Thank you very much, Minister Green. Thank you very much, Minister Green. We are still looking forward in South Trelawney to your tour with us as one of the main areas. We're still looking. Among others, but I know South Trelawney is a main farming area, and we're really waiting patiently to extend our hospitality to you.
Madam Speaker, it appears that you are now the opposition spokesman on agriculture, because you are speaking on my behalf when I say, Madam Speaker, that firstly, let me just indicate that devastation to the agricultural sector is of no fault of any government whatsoever. It is a natural disaster, an act of God, and there's nothing we could have done to prevent this devastation. Madam Speaker, I must also commend and take note of the intervention of the government in terms of providing relief. And I must commend, just to give credit where it is due, and I must commend the minister as well, because Minister, I know that you toured southwestern Clarendon last week. We spoke, you went into the constituency, and you saw firsthand the nature of the devastation. And I hope that you took note of the state of the road infrastructure, particularly as it relates to the farm roads. And so I have listened to your presentation and know your intention is to target 17 farm roads. I have not heard which particular roads. I'm hoping that soon we'll hear which particular roads, but I'm hoping as well that southwestern Clarendon is not excluded from those 17 roads that will be affected.
That's where you start. All politics is
simple. Minister, I was hoping as well to hear from you as it relates to your plan in terms of the intervention to protect the consumers who will be affected in Christmas. And I speak in reference to the fact that you have certain items, tomatoes, lettuce, cabbage, that attract a 260% duty, and that steps must be taken very soon to determine what the shortfall will be and how much you will need to import. And then you have to take further steps now to approach the minister to apply for duty waivers, because certainly these importers can't import tomatoes, carrots, cabbage, lettuce at the 260% that it currently attracts. I appreciate your reference to your intervention for catchments, and it's very important because it's like a catch-22 situation, Minister, for the farmers, because we have a period of excessive rainfall now, and then 2 months down the line, them experiencing drought. So I am very sympathetic to the farmers because come February, March, they'll be complaining about drought. And so we have to find a way, and a lot of Jamaicans must be wondering, how is it that we have so much rainfall, so much water this time of the year, and then come on next time of the year, they can't get any water to water the crops? And so I appreciate your reference to the catchments, and I would implore upon you to look at, for example, the micro dams. We have 2 in Southwest Clarendon. Take a look at the micro dams. There are micro dams there that can be utilized. The micro dams were introduced to Jamaica by Michael Mann in the 70s. And I believe they are very useful. They can be very useful. They can provide 2 options. One, it can help with the water runoff, excess water runoff in terms of storage of the water, taking the water off the field so that the farmers are not adversely affected. And 2, we store the water for future use so that come a few months' time, there's no issue as it relates to drought. And we have to try to find a way, because we can't control when rain falls, But we can take steps to ensure that when there is not enough rainfall, the farmers receive sufficient water to water their crops. And so that's very important, Minister. And I ask you to look at that. We have 2 in Southwestern Clarendon. You can come, look at them, tour them with me. And you can use them as a pilot project, a pilot program, to see how best we can. Because when the dams were initially introduced, the technology that was there wasn't sufficient, so there was a lot of seepage. But since then, I'm sure if you go to Jamaica Bauxite Institute, they can tell you that they have some new technologies now. Geotextile liner, geotextile membranes, you can use those now. And that will help us in terms of the storage of the water. So I ask you to, Minister, look at the usage of the microdams and see how best we can use those dams to help the farmers. I know, Minister, that there's also an issue with the shortage of chickens, day-old chicks. For the last 2, 3, 4 months, we have been facing this issue. Christmas is coming. I know there will be an increased demand for poultry meat. So I'm asking the Minister to see how best he can address that issue as well. Because I'm being told by constituents and persons across the island that they are now marrying the chickens with the feeding. So if you can't buy the amount of feeding for the 25 chickens, then you can't buy the chickens at all. And a lot of farmers or small farmers can't continue to operate like that. So I'm asking you, Minister, to take the steps that are necessary to address this issue. All in all, it is commendable in terms of the government. The government doesn't owe the farmers any obligation, but the government has done what is responsible in responding to the needs of the farmer at the time. And so, Minister, I'm here to work with you, and we're here to work together for the better Jamaica, because guess what? The only way we can get out of this pandemic is to grow out of this pandemic. And the only sector right now that poses that possibility for us to grow out of the pandemic is the agricultural sector. And so the success of that sector inures to all our benefits. So, Minister, thank you very much for what you have given to the farmers, and we look forward to working together. Thank you very much.
Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, just a few questions to the Minister. Under the Farm Road Programme, these 17 roads that you mentioned, if there's a possibility that once the list is compiled that we are able to see which roads these are, and are these roads that will be in the attention will be paid firstly in those areas that are worst affected. Also, there are some roads, and I see here where the Minister has an additional 100 million to help with some rehabilitation. But is it possible for us as members of Parliament also to recommend or to identify some of these roads that may not be identified by RADA? I have a road in my own constituency in the area of Medina, where that road is now impassable, but all you have up in that area are just real farmers. There's hardly any residential in that area, but there are farmers. And even though we have recommended that road on the Farm Road Programme, it is one that the 6 million that is allocated is not enough to fix that road, but it is now impassable. So if something remedial in roads like that, those will be looked at, and if each member of Parliament, especially in those areas that have been greatly affected. I see where the Minister has a tiered allocation for members of Parliament, especially more going to those in the affected areas. And I know that that RADA themselves, the extension officers, will be making recommendations for assistance to farmers. Even before the rains that we have experienced, especially for those of us in the parish of Manchester and some areas of St. Elizabeth, where we were getting rain long before ETA. And seeing that there has been a shortage of extension officers, which didn't start now, but there has been a perennial shortage of extension officers. Even the amount, which is more than grateful, but we know that it is going to be a small amount compared to the amount of farmers that are affected. In my own constituency, and similar to you, Minister, where 90% of the revenue base of the constituencies are from cash crops. If also that once this amount has been utilized, that is allotted to each member of Parliament, that those farmers that we may identify that are also damaged badly, the farms damaged badly, if we could just send those names to RADA, which could be added to the list of those who are able to benefit through RADA themselves. Is that a possibility?
Madam Speaker, Minister, as the opposition spokesman on agriculture quite rightly points out that with the shortages that would derive from as a result of the flood damages, the system of importation to meet the immediate needs, including the Christmas holidays, will no doubt be in play, and with that, issues of licenses and waivers. For some time, Minister, a discussion has commenced about how best to utilize those measures, the import measures, that could benefit the farmers and those investing in the very sector itself. Is this not an opportunity, Minister, for us, for the ministry, in responding to this damage and the losses, to tailor the import regime as to benefit the very farmers who are suffering either through their organization or otherwise, so that it is a way of sustaining the very farmers that are being adversely impacted now. And I think the time perhaps has come for us to look at the strategic approaches to agriculture and the use of waivers, licensing, and who benefits from that system of waivers and license, and whether the beneficiaries themselves should not be the very farmers who have invested so much of their lives in this sector. The other point I wish to raise, Minister, lastly, is that you have the tiered system of farmers. I have mentioned to you previously the unique position that Western St. Andrew finds itself, with a significant part of it being in rural, what was formerly West Rural St. Andrew, consisting of a number of farmers. And I wish to commend that to you, and not just simply the urban designation, of which it is as well. All right? Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Your hillside.
Thank you, members. The member from Southwest Clarendon. Thank you for your comments and your recommendations, your interventions. As you indicated, I was in your neck of the woods in Ebony Park, and the farmers are significantly hard hit. A lot of them in Ebony Park, they do have contractual arrangements, and we have been working with them to ensure that the contracting parties appreciate the challenges that they now face. I've made note in relation to the request regarding roads. Again, we will be doing roads across all the affected parishes. So Clarendon will benefit, and all of those parishes on the south, I've listed them that were most significantly affected, including parts of St. Andrew, the rural parts of St. Andrew. What I will do, and to member from Northwest Manchester, I have no challenge in relation to, once the list is compiled, to sharing that list, right, in relation to the roads that will be done across those affected parishes. As you rightly pointed out, we have recognized that part of our focus will be on the rehabilitation of catchment areas and the concept of micro dams, and working with the farmers to put ponds where they have the space and to work with them to develop those areas, because it is really a travesty that during these times of significant rainfall, we're not doing enough water harvesting to serve us during the times of drought. So we have started with this $40 million allocation to look at the catchment areas, look at the dams. It's just a start, but definitely I've already signaled to the ministry that this will be a program of the ministry going forward in our next financial cycle. We will allocate some funds to revive, resuscitate, and to introduce new catchment areas so that we can ensure that our farmers are secure in terms of water supply. The point in relation to baby chicks. So, of course, it's a matter that has come to our attention in the ministry, has come to my attention as minister and also as member of parliament. In fact, last week, Tuesday, I called in, along with the ministry's technical team, our marketing services unit. We brought in Jamaica broilers, we brought in Caribbean broilers, we also brought in a lot of the wholesalers and distributors, because we wanted to explore two things. One, the sufficiency of the supply of chicken meat for the Christmas, and the sufficiency of the supply of baby chicks. So I will say two things. One, in relation to the sufficiency of the supply of chicken meat, based on the forecasted numbers, we will be good for the Christmas, right? So our production of chicken meat, in fact, will be at the highest level ever across both companies, right? Both Jamaica broilers and Caribbean broilers, and we also will have sufficiency in terms of the supplementary sources that are used to bolster our protein supply. Outside of that, they have indicated that what has happened in relation to the baby chicks, what we have picked up, is that a number of people who used to operate in other industries, who largely because of COVID-19 have unfortunately lost that employment, they have turned to the production of chicken as a way to sustain themselves. So the demand that the companies are seeing for baby chicks has actually outstripped the demand last year this time when there was no COVID. So what they have had to do, they have had to increase their supply. In fact, one of our main players have put in a new line in their hatchery, and they expect that during this month of November, we should see a leveling out in relation to the unmet demand, and that by the end of November, we will have parity across the sector in relation to the supply of baby chicks. But I will say to the Member of Parliament, if you pick up issues, please let me know. I will call them in again. But those are the commitments that have been made to the government. Now, in relation to your point, member from Southwest Clarendon and also the member from St. Andrew Western, definitely part of what we are doing now as we speak is that we're looking at our forecasted numbers. We're looking at where there will be a shortfall. We definitely expect that there will be a shortfall across our vegetable lines, and as such, we'll have to do some supplementing, right? And the approach that we take and the approach that we will take in relation to any sort of importation is first, check with the farmers in relation to their numbers and only do what is necessary to ensure food security. We will look back. You have made a good suggestion. I was looking at it last week in relation to our duty regime and whether it is viable, feasible for anybody with that duty regime to actually bring in some vegetable lines. So I commit to look back at it and to have discussions with the Ministry of Finance. But just to say in a more general sense to the member from Western St. Andrew, we definitely have to have a relook at our entire regime regarding duties, waivers, importation of agricultural produce. We have actually started that work. We're looking comprehensively also our production relief incentive program for agriculture. A lot of the farmers have been saying it's too difficult for them to access when they really plan to go into significant agro-processing and agriculture. So I know JAMPRA was leading a charge in that regard, and we are looking at it from where we sit at the Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries. So we will continue to do that deep dive and come up with a more equitable system that takes into account our farmers. But in the short term, clearly, what we're going to be looking at now over the course of this week is the shortfall and how we can ensure that for Christmas we have sufficient supplies. That is critical. And in relation to the member from Northwest Manchester, so definitely once you identify any roads, write to the parish manager indicating the situation as a parish manager from RADA, and this is for all MPs. Yes, if there are roads across your constituency, farm roads that have suffered significant damage, please bring it to the attention of the RADA parish manager. And also farmers who have suffered damage, you can bring it to the attention of the RADA parish manager. Clearly, we will never have all the resources we need at any given time to address every single issue. And in relation to farm roads, quite frankly, even if you raise it, other than what we have reallocated for emergency, it may have to be in the next financial cycle. Because again, what we have tried to do is to ensure that we have a listing of roads that we have scoped, right, so that we can get through the procurement process much quicker. But raise it, and we will look at it and see what can be done to address it. And just in closing, two matters, just to indicate, Madam Speaker, that the figure is actually 646.9 million in terms of total relief, not 636, and that because we got an additional $10 million right before I came to Parliament from one of our private sector donors. So it wasn't reflected adequately in the speech. And just to indicate in relation to the allocations that we have made regarding our fisheries incentive program, letters should be distributed to the members of Parliament who have fishing beaches today. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
What about the other members of Parliament?
Leader.
Madam Speaker, the Prime Minister, the Most Honorable Andrew Holness, will now make a statement. May it please you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, members. Before I start, the Minister of Finance whispered to me and said, "Are you saying anything financial today?" Let me reassure him and the technocrats at the Ministry of Finance that whilst what I am saying will have financial implications, I have not come here with any new allocations. Copies are on your way. Madam Speaker, it would appear that I may have to be updating this House almost on a fortnightly basis on the status of our infrastructure due to heavy rains. In fact, Madam Speaker, this year our traditional rainy season has been very destructive to our road infrastructure in particular. Since my last statement made to this Honourable House on October 27, 2020 regarding the impact of weather conditions on the island's infrastructure, rainfall has continued to pose significant challenges to our recovery efforts. The rains and their resulting floods have in fact exacerbated the already difficult situation across the length and breadth of the country. The month of October ended with a tropical wave strengthening over the central Caribbean Sea and eventually developing into Hurricane Eta. Although the major hurricane moved over Central America and not directly over Jamaica, its outer bands engulfed the island and were persistent in producing devastating flood rains since the beginning of November. The deluge continued even as the system weakened over Nicaragua, Honduras, and Guatemala, and then re-emerged in the Caribbean Sea, moving past the Cayman Islands and approaching Cuba. Throughout this period, the reports of widespread flooding and landslides continued until Eta reached as far north as Florida on Sunday this week. There are still 20 days to go before the official end of the hurricane season, but with 2020 breaking every record that was set by the 2005 season, the development of tropical storms could again feature well after November 30th this year. Just last night, another storm, Theta, formed over the Atlantic Ocean, making the 2020 season now the all-time most active season, hurricane season on record. Madam Speaker, the Met Office is advising that forecast models again are projecting the strengthening of another tropical wave in the region later this week, and that it could be a repeat performance of increased rainfall for the weekend. So I urge persons living in low-lying areas, flood-prone areas, persons who reside on areas where we know the soil condition is unstable, that they should be prepared. The projections are that there will be more rainfall this weekend. Now, the longer-term prediction is that rainfall amounts are going to remain near to above normal levels, even after we enter the dry season in December to January. So we will continue to have rains through the rest of this year into January. These increasing torrential rains are appearing to be repeating every couple of years, which is consistent with the anticipated impact of climate change, which will bring more torrential rainfall outbreaks, followed by longer, more intense droughts. Given the persistent rainfall and predictions for further rainfall, we have had to be very measured in our response to date. And I don't want measured to be interpreted as not being fulsome in our response financially. We are doing the best we can with the resources we have. But we also have to be strategic. When do we deploy? We could very well deploy now, and then by the weekend, we have to go and redeploy. So we're being guided by the Met Office, and the Met Office's predictions, their forecasts are being incorporated in the NWA's response models. There are some areas for which it is not practical to do any major work until after the rain falls. Indeed, we may have to treat with some of these infrastructure damage post the hurricane season in order to benefit from fairer weather and to be frugal in the expenditure of public resources. Madam Speaker, the rains associated with Tropical Storm Eta severely impacted several communities, some of which had already suffered in earlier bouts of heavy rainfalls from Zeta. Zeta was the system that created the heavy rainfalls at the end of October. Now, the road network in most parishes was impacted, some at greater levels than others, but nonetheless adding to the almost $2 billion estimated damage assessment that I announced in this House 2 weeks ago. So the Tropical Storm Zeta, which formed at the end of October, when we did the assessment at that time, we were at about $2 billion. And this $2 billion, it's just for recovery and for clearing and some amount of rehabilitation. With this new system, ETA, which just became a hurricane and affected us, we have not yet completed the assessment in terms of the cost, which is what the Minister of Finance was worried about. So, Minister of Finance, the worry is still there. I just can't tell you what it is at this point. But they are doing the assessments. The NWA's preliminary assessment for this event shows that over 200 roads island-wide were severely impacted by similar issues as was the case with Zeta before. And in Zeta, I had reported that approximately 80 roads were severely impacted. With ETA rather, we have already now assessed 206 roads as being impacted. So under the previous system, we had 80 roads. Under this system, we have assessed 206 roads. Now, whether or not they are additional, we'll be cross-checking. But certainly you can see that it is an increase. So there will be a bill that we will have to contemplate as a parliament as to how we recover. Now, of the 23 roads that were listed as impassable during Zeta, remember Zeta is the system that affected us in October, all of those roads have been cleared so far. And when we say cleared, vehicles can traverse, but some may be single lane, some dual carriage, but all the roads are now passable, maneuverable, except for the Thompsontown Road to Victoria Road in Clarendon, where there was a partial collapse of the road. It is intended that reconstruction works will commence during the course of this financial year. So I have a listing which I will circulate to members of the roads that were affected to the point of them being impassable under Tropical Storm Zeta. And as I've said, all of those 23 roads have been cleared except one, which is the Thompsontown to Victoria, and that road had a partial collapse, which would require far more than what we can undertake in this program. And as quickly as possible, we will be mobilizing resources to ensure that the residents affected in those areas, that they can return to some form of normalcy. Now, the preliminary assessment indicates that the southern parishes were again more affected than the northern parishes. Madam Speaker, I'm informed that we now have, again, 23 corridors, including the Gordontown Road in St. Andrew, that are impassable or closed. So, under Hurricane Eta, we have had 206 roads affected, 23 impassable, including, which most persons would have seen circulating on social media, a major breakaway of a part of the Gordontown Road in St. Andrew. Now, the Gordontown Road is a major challenge at this time, as not only do we have to be dealing with the unstable hillsides that collapsed and repeatedly blocked the road, but we have a major breakaway that has essentially cut off this important main road and indeed all the communities going up into the hills of East Rural St. Andrew. I have instructed the NWA to ensure that all the necessary technical work is done expeditiously in order to get this issue resolved. It will require major effort and time to have the road connected at this location, given the challenging landscape. Just to place this in context for members, the road sits atop a river channel that is some 80 meters, that is about 262 feet. So from the base of the road to the river below, 262 feet. That's a significant fall off. But that's the other complication, is that there is an embankment on the other side of the road that is about 20 meters or about 60 feet high, which is also unstable. So I am not the engineer. The chief engineer is here. Well, it's being displayed on your screen. That's it. And we have seen other such slippage before in the Junction Road. We've seen that happen. Madam Speaker, if I may just crave the indulgence of members to just divert from my presentation for a minute. Because the question now facing the engineers and indeed the people who live in Irish Town and all these areas, what is the fastest way of getting this road rehabilitated? And how do we get people to be able to reach their homes in relative ease? The engineering solutions are now being crafted. In fact, there was another breakaway of similar nature just very close to where this one is, and so there is an engineering template as to how it could be done. But the question arises, Madam Speaker, the cost of doing this
Every year.
shouldn't it be that there are other considerations, such as a realignment of the road? Again, these are questions that we as politicians can ask, but they can be objectively answered by engineers. And they would have to present to us, which I've asked them to present, for us to do the cost-benefit, to see whether or not a realignment is not a better solution. Now remember, the embankment is 60 feet. It is still unstable soil, so the engineers will have to tell us. But the reason why I raise the issue, it has always been a puzzle to me, Madam Speaker. Why have we built roads following river courses? And I went back to just do some research. It's very interesting because, Madam Speaker, many of these roads, and you know, I see all the comments about our roads and they're being destroyed when it rains. You know, Madam Speaker, many of our roads, in fact, the vast majority of our roads were never engineered roads, meaning that they weren't built to any engineering specification. They weren't planned roads. The Gordtown Road, for example, emerged because it was first a pathway, a track, horse and buggy, leading to plantation, coffee plantations that were in the area. It then obviously became the main pathway, and then people settled in the area. Our governments came, put the asphalt on it, and there you have your roads. And this is repeated all over Jamaica. Take a point, the other puzzling, why have we built roads close to the sea? Again, it is where the settlements have emerged, and we have just followed the settlement path. But, Madam Speaker, we could ask ourselves then, how can we be critical of people who choose to go and settle on riverbanks, as we are now being totally exposed in my wife's constituency, but in all over Jamaica, where we are seeing housing on hillsides, on floodplains, on riverbanks, on gully banks being threatened. The point that I'm making, Madam Speaker, is that what happened in our past, where we settled without paying attention to proper engineering, obviously we did not have the information about climate change. The NWA would have taken over the roads for which they have responsibility. And you compare it to the register of main roads now, you would see that we may have added probably 2 new roads. And even then, they are not new. But we have totally reconstructed 2 of those roads. And that would be the Hagley Park main road and the Constant Spring main road. Totally reconstructed. And of course, we would have to add to that Mandela and Marcus Garvey, partially, parts of it. The point I'm making, Madam Speaker, is that the roads that we have now are the roads that were constructed decades, centuries even. They were never built to the specifications that are necessary to withstand the weather events that we have now. In trying to craft what will be the future of Jamaica in terms of its built environment and its infrastructure, we have to be far more deterministic. We cannot allow informal and illegal settlements to occur. Madam Speaker, we cannot allow communities to emerge and then we have to now follow behind with the infrastructure. I don't want to delve into the political underbelly as to how some of these communities emerge and why they have not been moved. But at some point, this nation will have to confront this. That because of political expediency, we have allowed some communities to exist. But now these communities are at risk. And the people who live there need to ask themselves, is settlement by virtue of political affiliation worth my life and property? The budget that we will now have to consider, it will soon be revealed. The budget that we will have to consider, Madam Speaker, will require us to now make allocations to recover and replace, rehabilitate housing that has been destroyed, roadways that have been destroyed. And the question is, should we seek to rebuild those houses and those roadways and recover those livelihoods in the place that they were destroyed? We see houses being destroyed on riverbanks. And the question is, obviously, it is going to come to the feet of the Parliament again to replace these houses, to assist those persons who have been dislocated. But the question that we will have to answer in this House, and the Cabinet will have to answer, should we seek to relocate those persons, or should we seek to rebuild in the same spot? My own view is that after an objective assessment is done, and we couldn't just make the decision without an objective assessment, determine whether or not we have lands available for relocation and whether or not the properties were in fact in a river course, floodplain, or a marginal area. But after that assessment is done, Madam Speaker, I wish to tell the nation that this administration is of the view that where location is recommended after objective assessment, then such relocation must be done. Last week, I said that when I last presented, I said, Madam Speaker, if only we could bridge the political divide to be able to have these communities that are at risk be relocated, we would be well ahead of the game. Because I know when the question of relocation is raised, you're going to hear objections. You're going to find all kinds of reasons why the persons can't move. And when you get down to it, it is where the names appear on the voters list. So I am just sounding the alarm, the warning now that we cannot have some of these communities continuing to exist in these areas in the face of the weather events that are projected to happen on a cyclical basis, because every 2 years you're going to have this cry. By the way, for members, we had these kinds of heavy rains in 2016. We had them again in 2018, and we're having them now.
We had Montego Bay 2018, 2019.
We had them in two, and it's repeating itself over and over. But you know, Madam Speaker, in speaking to the head of the NWA, what has happened in the past, and I bring it up because, you know, residents have complained. We have had hurricanes, we have had heavy rains, infrastructure has been destroyed. The government makes an allocation, but the allocation is just for clearing debris and to just bringing back the road to the bare drivable conditions. Very limited rehabilitation is done. So in other words, for every single weather event that happens, the infrastructure is permanently degraded because whichever government, this administration or previous administration, simply does not have the fiscal wherewithal to bring the road back up to standard. So every 2 years, you can expect the infrastructure around Jamaica to be degraded by a significant weather event, but you will not see the commensurate budgetary allocation to bring the infrastructure back to where it should be. That is the reality that we face. What it says to us is that where people live in Jamaica has to now become a focus of government attention. We have to build infrastructure that is defensible. So it's not where you feel you want to go and live. We have to build infrastructure that is defensible, that is resilient, that incorporates these eventualities of weather events, and then we have to build the planned communities around the infrastructure. Then we have to encourage people who are living, many of them in these unplanned communities, to transition into the planned communities. And which is why we have put in place the Ministry of Urban Renewal, Urban Development, because that is the kind of long-term strategy that has to be laid out. If Jamaica is going to survive in this new era of extreme climate variability and the impacts of climate change, then the infrastructure we build must be built to last and withstand. And with the budget that we have based upon our economy, we have to take economic decisions about the infrastructure and the settlements around it. So, Madam Speaker, thank you for allowing me to depart from my script.
Need some more time.
You are getting more time. I was just about to urge you that we have gone
Madam
twice
Speaker,
the time. So.
Madam Speaker, I will not wear your patience thin.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Expedite the remaining 4 or 5
Thank
pages.
you. Thank you so much, Pierre.
Now, the problems for the people of the Garden Town area were further compounded by landslides, including one massive earth movement along the Irish Town Road, which is the natural alternative for many of these residents. The NWA is making progress to clear that major landslide along the Irish Town Road. Now, I expect them to clear that impediment today. It's cleared now. Very good. So this was written. I expect, well, it's cleared now. That's good. So persons who live in Section and Silver Hill Gap and so forth and surrounding communities, they will be able to hopefully access these areas. I'm not promising that they will be able to access it in comfort, but certainly they will be able to access. Madam Speaker, I said another alternative because I've been advised that there is a road connecting Gordon Town and Irish Town. Well, not necessarily a road, more like a track or a pathway, but that will be cleared as well so that the residents there will have alternatives. Now, in relation to the Bull Bay area, additional heavy-duty equipment is being brought in to assist in the desilting of the Chalky River, which has been a source of some of the flooding that has impacted that community. Madam Speaker, I want to again underscore the need for residents to ensure that when the government spends millions to assist in building resilience in our drainage infrastructure, that nothing is done to compromise the system. We might have been able to mitigate significantly the impact of the flooding on those persons at, is it Wees Road? Wees Road, had the grinds stayed in place. Now, Madam Speaker, I am informed that some of the grinds in that area, in the river, that they were compromised. My understanding is that some of the grinds were cut and the stones removed. And indeed, it's not just in the Bull Bay area, it's a practice that is common island-wide, where people remove the stones from the grinds to build their pits. And we have to discourage that practice. And as base as it seems, we have to make note of these things in our parliament and use a parliamentary platform to appeal to Jamaicans island-wide. Please leave the grinds in place. They are there to drain the river, to protect your property and livelihood. And if you destroy them when there are events like these, then you see the consequences. You are actually hurting yourself. So I'm going to provide some information on roads that have been affected and just give a quick update as to their status in terms of the intervention by the NWA. Cooperage Ridge to Guava Ridge, that was impassable due to a landslide, and work they have started to scope and mobilize to clear that. Papine to Red Light, that is impassable due to landslides, and equipment is currently working to clear that. Papine to Bull Bay, that is a Cane River Road. Those conditions, the road conditions there have worsened, and they have been also affected by landslides, and there was a collapse of a retaining wall. The NWA has done its assessment and is mobilizing equipment to start clearing that area. Papine to Linda's Gap, we have managed to get single lane mobility there, and we are again mobilizing more equipment to have that road cleared. In terms of Red Light to Hardware Gap and Hardware Gap to Silver Hill Gap, that is currently blocked, but we are now working to establish an alternate route. In terms of Guava Ridge to Silver Hill Gap, sections of the road is completely blocked, and they are working to establish single lane to create access to the Gordon Town community. So they are working there to create single lane access. In terms of the Cupius to the Colonel Ridge in Clarendon, that is completely blocked by landslides. Equipment have been mobilized and they have started clearing the work, but there is an unstable hillside which is hampering progress, but they expect to have single lane traffic open by the end of the day. In terms of Danks to Crofts Hill, this in Clarendon, this road is completely blocked in 3 sections by major landslides at Crawl River and Arthur's Seat. They are working to have single lane established at Crawl River, and this work is in progress. Orange Hill to Main Ridge in Clarendon, that is completely blocked in several sections, and communities are marooned. The NWA is currently working to clear a single lane pathway, and this work is in progress. Also, Alston to Peckham in Clarendon, there's a landslide and the washdown of silt at Tweedside, and the roadway is currently inaccessible to small vehicles, so they are still working to have that cleared. if it's even to give them single lane access. The Spanish Town to Bogwark Gorge, that is now open. They have done all the necessary work there, so traffic can flow smoothly there. Belfield to Planters in St. Catherine, that's completely blocked by a massive landslide with fallen trees at multiple sections. We have mobilized equipment there, and they have started to clear the area. Landway to Windsor Forest in St. Thomas, landslides with mostly rock that would have come down from the hill in the Smithfield area. Equipment is on site, and they are hoping to at least give single lane access. In terms of Windsor Forest to Cedar Valley in St. Thomas, again blocked by landslides at Richmond Vale, and the NWA is working to clear at least some of the areas there to give single lane access. Windsor Forest to Mahogany Vale, again blocked by landslides in the vicinity of Mahogany Vale and the White River Fords. The NWA is on spot, and they're working to clear those. Penline Castle, completely blocked by landslides. Equipment has not yet been mobilized to clear the landslides, but they have identified equipment, and they will move to have this shortly. In terms of roads blocked because of flooding in St. Thomas, Pleasant Hill to Hector's River, the road was impassable due to flooding. The water has now receded, so they are now doing cleanup where is necessary. Hordley to Haining, again, that was impassable due to flooding. The water has now receded. Hordley to Bath, that was again impassable due to flooding. The water has now receded. The Morant River Bridge in St. Thomas, that was impassable due to flooding. It has been cleared enough to allow for single road traffic. In Newmarket, in Carmel and St. Elizabeth, impassable due to flooding. Caution is urged as floodwaters are rising, and this is traditional for this year when there is heavy rain. And the solution is that they have to allow that area to just naturally drain. There's nothing that they can really do. In Trelawney, wire fence to Warsop, there is a failure of an embankment, partial collapse of the roadway, and that is currently impassable. A contractor has been engaged, and so they should mobilize very soon to have some work done there. Wait a bit to Hector's River in Trelawney, completely blocked by landslides. There's no alternate route, and a contractor has been engaged, and they are seeking to have the road reopened today. Hopefully they will be able to do so. And Coleyville to Ballinure in Manchester, there's a failure in the embankment, partial collapse of the roadway, and the road section partially collapsed and is reduced to single lane traffic. We have not yet identified a contractor, but that is in progress, so hopefully before the week is out, we should have some works done there. So, Madam Speaker, the estimate of this latest heavy rain flood event is yet to be tabulated, but it is on the NWA main roads across the country. Now, the most significant damage to the parochial road network has occurred in the parishes of St. Catherine, St. Anne, St. Elizabeth, and Clarendon. St. Mary and St. James have also been affected, but there are no reports of major damage to the road networks in Westmoreland and Hanover. Extensive assessments and work is being carried out in sections of Kingston, St. Andrew, St. Thomas, and Manchester. In response to the inclement weather, a number of shelters were opened in various parishes, with 48 people being housed at these facilities. Madam Speaker, there is no doubt that many across the island are suffering from the inconveniences of various kinds of dislocations relating to damage to road infrastructure. I urge our people to be patient, as we cannot respond to all situations at the same time. We do not have, as you know, unlimited resources, and therefore we must be strategic in how we allocate and use our scarce resources. I announced a $2 billion program 2 weeks ago, Madam Speaker. We intend to move quickly to start assessing some of the many issues using this program. Some critical drains are to be cleaned and a major road patching exercise undertaken. These will help to mitigate some of the incidences of flooding and provide some relief from some of the potholes that I see have developed on some of our roads. Madam Speaker, the Jamaica Defence Force has commenced its deployment as of 4 p.m. today in Bull Bay to assist. This is of the JDF's Disaster Assistance Response Team, the DART. You will recall, Madam Speaker, that we have deployed the DART overseas at least twice. We went to Dominica and we deployed as well to the Bahamas. We were observing the situation in Cayman. It turned out that Cayman did not need our assistance, but our local people need the assistance. Clearly the Bull Bay area, all of that area needs assistance. So the DART, our team, will deploy. The DART is the JDF's disaster response mechanism. It's comprised of engineers, infantrymen, logisticians, and support staff. The team typically deploys overseas, but maintains the capability to deploy locally in response to any natural disaster situation facing the country. The team is currently in Bull Bay by now and should be actively coordinating with the ODPEM and the NWA to determine where they see as the areas of critical need, and they will also be assisting residents in the area. Madam Speaker, this is the extent of my update to the nation. I take the opportunity to urge all Jamaicans to remain safe, to make the right decisions, Madam Speaker, when these weather events are happening. We are seeing the videos being circulating of people trying to be reporters and trying to get close to the destruction that is happening. I urge all Jamaicans to be careful and to stay safe. Leave the reportage to the professionals, because we wouldn't want to hear any loss of life because, the curiosity of someone. Wait until after the event. So, Madam Speaker, may it please you.
Well done. Very well.
Madam Speaker, I thank the Prime Minister for his update. And there's no doubt that there's a lot of hardship and suffering out there occasioned by the 2 or 3 weeks of sustained rains over different weather systems. And Prime Minister, we have one of the most extensive road networks in the world in terms of roads per square mile in Jamaica. And as a very mountainous country, many of our roads traverse valleys, and there will be rivers in valleys often, because we are, or certainly were originally, a land of wood and water. And so many of these roads have lasted for a remarkably long time. But some of the problems that we have relate to land slippages rather than the roads themselves. And often that is a result of the degradation of the environment through improper practices, and I suppose a lack of attention to trying to ensure that areas which are vulnerable to slippages are shored up in one way or another. Things like appropriate grasses or bamboo and so on, things that will bind soil, can contribute a very low-cost solution to some of the slippages that end up costing a lot of money to address when there are these heavy rains. One of the things that concerns many Jamaicans, including myself, is the fact that many of the engineered roads recently constructed, have suffered tremendous damage, and in particular, flooding, problems of flooding. We have seen flooding in many urban areas. Hagley Park Road has a flooding problem. Marcus Garvey Drive has a flooding problem. I mean, I hear the howls, but it's a reality. And we've heard persons, senior engineers in the public service indicate that the drainage situation is a problem, because in the design of the roads, sometimes inadequate arrangements for drainage have been put in place. So I think we also have to look at how when we're expending large amounts of money on engineered roads, that we don't cut corners or rush unduly, so that we ensure that in an era of climate change and extreme weather events that are coming at us every year or every other year, that the infrastructure that we put in place has the necessary elements of support in drainage and so on, so that we don't suffer losses or suffer the inconvenience of businesses and residents along the corridor suffering from severe flooding. And that has been a problem in parts of the corporate area, Montego Bay and elsewhere. And I'm not casting blame in saying that on any administration, because I'm sure it spans administrations. But the point really is that if we don't ensure that we do the necessary planning and ensure that the necessary arrangements to support the infrastructure are in place, we're going to suffer the consequences down the road. And I think that's an important point. The Prime Minister indicated the issue of informal settlements and persons living where they shouldn't be living because it's not safe. I don't personally think that there's any political affiliation in that. That is a socio-economic problem. That's a socio-economic problem in Jamaica. There are informal settlements that would describe to themselves affiliations to both political parties. So I don't think that I don't see the point of trying to infer or any innuendos to say that this is somehow a political, one-sided political issue. I think it is a major sociological issue, socio-economic issue, and it's having a partisan approach to it. It's really not helpful, and it's not truthful either. So I think we should try to avoid, when we're discussing such a significant thing as that, trying to ascribe some kind of political motive or political undertones to the lack of solutions to these issues. There have been programs over many years attempting to deal with this problem, but I don't think any of them has been 100% successful. Some of them have fallen by the wayside because of issues that have affected the management of the program. Some is maybe a resource issue and so on. But generally speaking, where you're talking about persons at the very base of the society who are living in a very marginal way on marginal lands, vulnerable communities, to try and say that it's a political problem as opposed to a national problem, I don't think is a helpful approach personally. It does cause umbrage on our side, because the inference is somehow that our side is more to blame than another side. I don't think this is a side thing. This is a national socio-economic problem. Yeah. It was clearly inferred. It was clearly inferred by the howls and remarks that were said at the time. So we can pretend that it didn't exist, but we know that it did. So I would just, at this point, just say to the Prime Minister, I want to endorse your call for everybody to stay safe. Some of the videos show people taking risks where there's been a major land slippage, and the rest, what remains may not be stable, and yet people are inclined to go and test it or get too close to it and so on. And I think until the engineers of the NWA have done their assessments and so on, I would encourage residents in those locations to try to stay safe, be cautious, and don't take any undue risks. And to the residents who are suffering, lack of access and so on, Prime Minister, we hope that the response will be as expeditious as possible for those residents. I know that we are trying to do everything within the confines of the budget as amended in September. And, you know, that was a budget which had taken, the adjustments were really around primarily a response to the COVID crisis. Now we have a major infrastructural problem on our hands, and to try and deal with that on top of the COVID problem out of the same envelope of funding, I think is going to be extremely challenging for Jamaica. But I know the Minister of Finance will be pondering this issue as the bills continue to mount. And we can only hope, Madam Speaker, that in the week to come, we are spared any further extreme weather events so that the damage that has already been caused isn't made any worse. So I do sympathize with the situation, Prime Minister, and we keep our fingers crossed and our prayers that God will spare us any further damage in the week to come, because we've already had more than our fair share. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Madam Speaker, thank you. Prime Minister, just like the Leader of the Opposition and yourself, I think the situation that we have found ourselves nationally, seeing that we have had one of the most active hurricane seasons, the rainfalls that we have been seeing were not just last weekend, but we have been seeing weeks and weeks of rain. I mean, since election day, we have been seeing rain at least every week on the southern side of the country. No, it is a fact, and this is not political. It is just the amount of rain, the saturation level, and to say that we need to deal with what we are facing now as a national emergency. Yeah? Because as you speak, Madam Speaker, through you to the Prime Minister, of being strategic. On numerous occasions I have come to the House and I have said that at the start of each hurricane season, we need to be more strategic in our mitigation program. We used to be. Last time you made your presentation, I spoke about the days gone by when we used to desilt the rivers out at Bull Bay in the event of rainfalls like this. Yeah? But I'd like to say to you, Sir Prime Minister, just as a matter of urgency, some resources need to be found not only for the major drains, but some of these secondary drains in the interior of the country. We have some, now that we know that there is going to be more rainfall, there are some roads that becomes impassable with even just half an hour of rain. If we can get some resources to urgently, and even if this is deployed to the National Works Agency, parish offices, but some of these drains can be cleaned immediately so that we don't see a reoccurrence in some of the areas that we are seeing. But also, Mr. Prime Minister, there's a matter of urgency also. If we don't have enough personnel at the National Works Agency, but if the JDF can also be used, they have some major thoroughfares, that there are some breakaways that cannot be seen at nights, with damaged roads, where you have some of the verges that is cut off going down into ravines. If some warning signs urgently can be placed in these areas to warn the traveling public so that we don't have any loss of lives in these areas. But also, as we speak of no-bill zones and the fervor that the Prime Minister speak of persons building in areas that have no infrastructure and having the government having to go in after to do these infrastructure work. We also have to take the same or pay the same attention to those residents who have been relocated from bauxite mining areas onto lands relocated by the law itself, but still have no infrastructure in some of these areas. And I want, as we speak about these informal communities, we speak of the same, zest and zeal of dealing with these areas of relocation to these. I'm happy to hear that the army is going out into Bull Bay, but also can be deployed in other areas of East Rural and West Rural St. Andrew, in those areas to help some of those residents also. But just a thought, Prime Minister, because the whole program has a housing component to it. And we have, for the last couple of years, we have not seen the build-out of houses under the HOPE program. And many of these beneficiaries are persons that are living in deplorable conditions. I'd urge your Prime Minister, if you could look at this housing component of the HOPE program, see if some urgency can be given to the build-out of these houses, which will give some employment to some small contractors and take some of these persons who may have lost their houses during this rainy period. Because, I mean, I speak of my own constituency, a list of names have been taken over a year and a half ago, but not one house has been built for any of these residents. And I think some urgency can be given to the build-out of this program. But again, Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, to you, Sir Prime Minister, I'm begging if some resources can be found to do some urgent drain cleaning in some of these areas so that we don't see some of the blockage of the roadways in some of the interior, especially interior parts, because we generally deal with the main roads, and also for those warning signs to be put out there for the traveling public so that we don't have any loss of life. Thank you very much.
Thank you, member from Northwest Manchester. A very good presentation. I take the suggestion on the warning signs. The head of the NWA is here. They have that mandate. I will reaffirm that to the NWA. The DART is being deployed island-wide to areas that are affected. So their first stop would be in the Bull Bay area. And as you would have seen from footage and news items, many residents would have just lost their homes, furniture, and would be in need of assistance. So they will start there. They would also offer engineering and logistic support. They will help. They will help residents to recover. On the point of flooding, I mean, my bedtime reading is going to be this document. It's the Comprehensive Drainage and Flood Control Report. This was a study undertaken by Stanley Consultants, sponsored by the IDB and the government of Jamaica. I mentioned it in my last presentation. This is the Comprehensive Drainage Plan. So it is not that we don't know what to do. The issue is how to fund it. And then how to strategically deploy. So you mentioned, the flooding of some of the main roads that we have done. Now, as we seek to upgrade the network, so for example, we have upgraded Constant Spring Road, we have upgraded Hagley Park Road, and we have upgraded Marcus Garvey Drive. As these roads don't stand by themselves. So they are designed off the hills of East Rural and West Rural St. Andrew. And all the water, most of the water leading from the roads in the communities that it traverses. And those areas don't generally have a large flooding problem. But, for example, when you start to consider Marcus Garvey Drive, which is at or below sea levels in some place, you will have flooding, and therefore you need to have that drain. And so that is, the construction of that drain would be a priority for the government And hopefully we can make some budgetary allocations for that in the next financial year. Member, the leader of the opposition raised the point regarding my comments appearing to politicize vulnerable informal settlements. But, Madam Speaker, it is the case that this is a national issue. It is not my intention to politicize it. Indeed, it is my intention to take away the political impetus. The leader of the opposition having said this is not a political issue. Very important statement, and we are happy that it has been made. And therefore, that sets now the basis for the government to work with the citizens and the opposition, who definitely would have a stake to see to the proper relocation. But we must come to a consensus in this House that we cannot allow communities that have emerged in areas that are susceptible. You know, Madam Speaker, the institutional memory still exists for many communities that know that the river was here 10 years ago and then it shifted over there. If it was here 10 years ago, it can come back and probably will come back. And we know this. And if every single budget we have to be trying to repair and rehabilitate, isn't it far more, a wiser decision, both for the residents and for the taxpayer, to have persons relocated? Indeed, Madam Speaker, the cost that it is going to take to try and defend indefensible infrastructure, it would be much cheaper to relocate to more comfortable and properly designed facilities. That is the reality. So the national debate has to begin, and it starts in the Parliament. We may very well have to have it in the Parliament and outside of the Parliament and in the Cabinet. It is not something that I propose we can do without having consensus, because relocation is in itself dislocation. And so we have to be very careful that we're not sending a threatening message, but rather a message of let us work together to find the best solution for all. I thank you, Madam Speaker.
Prime Minister, you had mentioned that the forecast is for more rain this weekend, and having regard to the high level of saturation, I wonder what are the plans for perhaps centers to be open. I'm not too sure what exactly the forecast is, but have you been able to activate ODPEM in this regard to anticipate what could be possible this weekend?
The Minister of Local Government is here. It's not the practice in the statements, but just to say that ODPEM, remember now, both administrations have agreed on our disaster response mechanism. So it's not even for us to activate. We have a standing response mechanism. And so under the Disaster Risk Management Act and so forth, we can make certain declarations. We are not at the stage where we would make declarations, but in terms of the routine response, yes, centers have been open, as I said in my report. 48 persons have been housed in some of these centers, and the parish disaster committees are activated. So in other words, this is what we mean, Madam Speaker, when we say we are building resilience, we are mainstreaming resilience in the government. In other words, these are things that should just happen routinely, and it is being done. As I've said, this is coming from 2015 when the new act was done. So it's a standing arrangement about building resilience in the government. And a part of that resilience building, the Minister of Finance will tell you, is the setting aside of resources for these eventualities. So the Minister of Finance has set aside in the, what's it called, in the national...
There are two. There's one under the disaster.
Under disaster, which is controlled by the Minister of Local Government.
No. Financial Secretary. Minister of Finance controls.
The point is, Madam Speaker, we have been setting aside. It's not a massive amount because we don't have that flexibility in the budget, but that's a part of the resilience that we have been setting aside, and having the standing capacity to respond. So we have built capacity to respond, Madam Speaker, in the JDF. We have built capacity to respond in the Ministry of Finance and how we have put our budget, and we have built capacity to respond in the ODPM, which is why I am able to come to Parliament and routinely give an update as to where we are.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Announcements?
Laid on the table of the House today are the following. Annual report of the Export-Import Bank of Jamaica Limited, Exim Bank, for the year 2019-2020. Report of the Ethics Committee of the House of Representatives on its deliberations on the motion for exemption brought on behalf of the Member of Parliament for Clarendon Central. The report of the Ethics Committee of the House of Representatives on its deliberations on the motion for exemption brought on behalf of the Member of Parliament for Trelawney Southern, and the report of the Ethics Committee of the House of Representatives on its deliberations on the motion for exemption brought on behalf of the Member of Parliament for Clarendon Northwestern.
Thank you. Bills brought from the Senate, petitions, reports from committees.
Madam Speaker, I beg to lay on the table of the House a copy of the report of the Ethics Committee of the House of Representatives on its deliberation on the motion for exemption brought on behalf of the Member of Parliament for Clarendon Central. Madam Speaker, I also beg to lay on the table of the House a copy of the report of the Ethics Committee of the House of Representatives on its deliberations on the motion for exemption brought on behalf of the Member of Parliament for Trelawney Southern. And Madam Speaker, I also beg to lay on the table of the House a copy of the report of the Ethics Committee of the House of Representatives on its deliberations on the motion for exemption brought on behalf of the Member of Parliament for Clarendon Northwestern. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Petitions, papers, notices of motions given orally.
Madam Speaker, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the House, I will move the following motions. 1, be it resolved that the report of the Ethics Committee of the House of Representatives on its deliberations on the motion for exemption brought on behalf of the Member of Parliament for Clarendon Central, which was laid on the table of the House on the 10th day of November 2020, be approved. 2, be it resolved that the report of the Ethics Committee of the House of Representatives on its deliberations on the motion for exemption brought on behalf of the Member of Parliament for Trelawney Southern, which was laid on the table of the House on the 10th day of November 2020, be approved. And be it resolved that the report of the Ethics Committee of the House of Representatives on its deliberation on the motion for exemption brought on behalf of the Member of Parliament for Clarendon Northwestern, which was laid on the table of the House on the 10th day of November 2020, be approved. Madam Speaker, I further beg to give notice that at a later stage today, I will move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take the motion. these motions. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Questions and answers to questions. Motions that may be made at the commencement of public business requiring notice. Motions relating to sittings of the House. Motions for leave to introduce bills. And now, presentation of bills without leave of the House first obtained.
Madam Speaker, I now move to introduce and have read a first time a bill shortly entitled the Shipping Amendment Act 2020.
A bill shortly entitled the Shipping Amendment Act 2020, read a first time.
Madam Speaker, I beg to give notice of second reading of the bill.
Madam Speaker, I beg to move to introduce and have read a first time a bill shortly entitled the Bank of Jamaica Amendment Act 2020.
A bill shortly entitled the Bank of Jamaica Amendment Act 2020, read a first time.
Madam Speaker, I beg to give notice of second reading of the bill. Madam Speaker, I now move to introduce and have read a first time a bill shortly entitled the Revenue Administration Amendment Act 2020.
A bill shortly entitled the Revenue Administration Amendment Act 2020, read a first time.
Madam Speaker, I beg to give notice of a second reading of the bill. And Madam Speaker, I further beg to give notice that at a later stage today, I'll move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take second reading of the bill and to take it through all its concluding stages.
Public business.
Madam Speaker, the Minister of Finance will now commence the debate on the Revenue Administration Act 2020.
Madam Speaker, I now move for suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take second reading of the bill entitled an act to amend the Revenue Administration Act and to take it through all its concluding stages.
Those in favor? Those against? Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it.
Madam Speaker, just I'm inquiring because the Leader of the Opposition, who is the spokesman on finance, wasn't aware that you'll be taking this through all its stages today. Right. Is it your intention to close the debate today and for it to be passed? Because that is not.
Agenda. I'm not going to. I mean, you're saying that you're not.
I'm not prepared today.
You're not prepared?
Yeah, I'm not today. But you go ahead.
Okay. I'll work with you. Okay. Madam Speaker, the Revenue Administration Amendment Act 2020 was approved by Cabinet for tabling and debate in the Houses of Parliament on May 26 and was drafted in pursuance to Cabinet Decision number 4517 dated December 2017, which approved ratification of the Convention on Mutual Administrative Assistance in Tax Matters. The decision also authorized the issue of drafting instructions to the Office of the Chief Parliamentary Counsel to amend the Revenue Administration Act to incorporate into domestic law the common reporting standard of automatic exchange of information, one of the forms of mutual administrative assistance provided in the multilateral mutual administrative assistance in tax matters. Madam Speaker, the bill was first tabled in the House of Parliament in June of this year, so it has been in the public domain for a few months, and we did not take it prior to the dissolution of Parliament, and it was retabled last week and proposed to take it, to open the debate today and I'll work with the opposition leader and hold off on the closure of it until next week. Yeah. Madam Speaker, the bill is being tabled at this time against the background of a world that has and will continue to be increasingly globalized, making it easier for taxpayers, 200 jurisdictions that make up the world, to make, hold, and manage investments through financial institutions outside of their country of residence. That's a common feature of today's world. You grow up in one place, you're educated in another place, you live in another place, and you retire in a fourth place, and you have investments in each of those jurisdictions and maybe others. The increasing global nature of finance and investments is such that to ensure equity in taxation, countries have a shared interest in maintaining the integrity of their tax systems and have determined that cooperation among and between tax administrations through the use of mutual and multilateral instruments is the only effective means of incentivizing compliance on a global scale. Madam Speaker, cooperation has been exemplified by the exchange of information in respect of relevant taxpayers between jurisdictions, and this has mostly occurred bilaterally. Exchange of information has been a long-standing part of the legal and domestic landscape in Jamaica, forming the basis of an article in our double taxation agreements, as well as being the subject of standalone bilateral tax information exchange agreements. So we have had bilateral tax exchange information agreements with countries for decades, some of them for 3 decades or more. Further, Madam Speaker, we have had bilateral exchange agreements with countries like the United States, and I'll get to that in my presentation, through FACTA, for a few years. Now, the mutual assistance, the MAC treaty, which we would have signed many years ago, but which was entered into force, which was ratified in 2018 and entered into force in 2019, and it allows for a multilateral exchange platform as opposed to various bilateral platforms. Now, notwithstanding the existence of bilateral instruments dealing with exchange of information, as I mentioned, the MAC is a multilateral convention that was designed as an instrument of international law to facilitate all forms of administrative cooperation, and it contains strict rules on confidentiality and a proper use of information, and permits automatic exchange of information, with one of its main advantages being global reach. Since 2012, political interest globally has focused on opportunities provided by automatic exchange of information, and in September of 2013, it was determined by G20 finance ministers and central bank governors that automatic exchange of information was a new global standard to be expected. And this was closely followed by a decision to model the global standard for exchange of information on the Model Intergovernmental Agreement to improve international tax compliance and to implement the Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act, FACTA, as developed between several European countries and the United States, and which already successfully forms part of our domestic landscape. By 2014, over 114 jurisdictions had committed to swiftly implement what has been described as the Common Reporting Standard, including translating it into their domestic law. Madam Speaker, Jamaica is among the last countries in the Caribbean to introduce the automatic exchange of information outside of bilateral agreements, with over 16 of our Caribbean neighbors, including Trinidad and Tobago, Barbados, St. Lucia, Cayman, and many others, having either started exchanges under the automatic exchange standard in 2018 and 2019, or committed to doing so as soon as their legislative framework is in place. while other countries faced external pressure to have this implemented, Jamaica could progress on a more modest timetable because we're not seen to have a harmful jurisdiction by the international tax community. And Jamaica has been seen quite opposite as a role model and example in compliance with global standards. So we were not previously required to commit to starting automatic exchange of information. However, we have used that flexibility and we now need to go ahead and fulfill the obligations that we have under the treaty to pass the amendments to our Revenue Administration Act to incorporate elements of the Common Reporting Standard into domestic law. Madam Speaker, the information which forms the focus of the global model for automatic exchange is financial and banking and investment information. The Common Reporting Standard, with a view to maximizing efficiency and reducing the costs for financial institutions, draws extensively on the existing intergovernmental approach that was used in the implementation of FACTA. So FACTA, I believe, was implemented in 2015, I believe, even though it was, it was primed a little bit before that. While there are some deviations from the FACTA model due to the multilateral nature of the Common Reporting Standard, and there are other US-specific aspects in FACTA, there's very little in terms of fundamental difference in the substance of the requirements. The Common Reporting Standards in this regard will therefore operate in substance as FACTA does, but on a multilateral basis. So rather than having a FACTA between US and Jamaica, a FACTA between the United States and between Jamaica and the UK, a FACTA with Japan, a FACTA with Barbados, we just have one common reporting standard that's multilateral in nature. And FACTA stands, in parallel as a US-based agreement. The effectiveness of any model of automatic exchange of financial account information depends on its standardization in order to benefit the maximum number of jurisdictions, while simultaneously recognizing that certain issues remain to be decided by local implementation. The advantages of standardization include process simplification, higher effectiveness, and lower costs for all stakeholders. It was noted, Madam Speaker, that as tax evasion is a global issue, the model needs to have global reach and applicability to adequately address the issue of tax evasion and does not merely relocate the problem. The main success factors for the effective automatic exchange of financial information are: 1, a common standard on information reporting, due diligence, and exchange of information. 2, the legal and operational basis for the exchange of information. And 3, common or compatible technical solutions. Madam Speaker, in this regard, Jamaica intends to leverage its successful experience in the implementation of FACTA to proceed with the introduction of the Common Reporting Standard locally. To this end, there have been stakeholder consultations with a number of representatives of private sector bodies, including the PSOJ, the Jamaica State Legislation. It was determined that the reference method would be more effective to maintain the continuum of our current legislation. This seamless incorporation would also be more conducive to making the transition easier for all relevant stakeholders. Madam Speaker, the proposed amendments to the Revenue Administration Act are as follows: to Section 17NB, 17NC, 17ND, 19, and the first and second schedules. Madam Speaker, consequent on the need for a seamless transition, the bill seeks to amend Section 17NB, 17NC, and 19, and the first and second schedules of the Revenue Administration Act. Further, there are proposed insertions of a new Section 17ND and a third and fourth schedule. These amendments to the Revenue Administration Act are designed to augment the Minister's power to make regulations in respect of international agreements, to include the power to amend the new regulations, increase or decrease the number of said international agreements based upon policy decisions, as well as to amend the text of the MAC, if I may just use the acronym, as may be required to keep abreast with international developments. The other amendments to the Revenue Administration Act seek to insert the substance of the Common Reporting Standard as regulations into a third schedule, and the text of the MAC as a fourth schedule to the Act. To ensure that these amendments are cohesively read into the Act, there are minor amendments to pluralize all references to the schedule to account for the new schedules being inserted. The proposed third schedule contains the substance of the Common Reporting Standard, including the reporting and due diligence requirements that underpin the automatic exchange of financial account information. Any jurisdiction implemented the Common Reporting Standard, and all of our 16 of our neighbors have already implemented it. Those who, in the private sector who have businesses in the region would have already been impacted by the requirement to report under the Common Reporting Standard. Any jurisdictions implementing the CRS must have rules in place that oblige financial institutions to follow the due diligence procedures consistent with the procedures contained in the Common Reporting Standard, and then to report relevant information consistent with the reporting terms outlined in the CRS. To facilitate a consistent application of these terms, an interpretation section is also included in the regulations to clarify its scope and intention. The financial institutions covered by the standard include custodial institutions, deposit-taking institutions, investment entities, and specified insurance companies, unless they present a low risk of being used for evading tax and are excluded from reporting. The financial information to be reported with respect to reportable accounts include interest, dividends, account balance or value, and income from certain specified products and other specified accounts. The reportable accounts include accounts held by individuals and entities, and as is the case with FACTA, the CRS requires that authority looks through passive entities to report on relevant controlling persons. So, Madam Speaker, it is a scaling up, a multilateral equivalent of FACTA. Under FACTA, if you are a U.S. person and you hold a bank account or an investment account or some other financial account in Jamaica, that institution is required to report it to the authorities in Jamaica. The authorities in Jamaica are required to exchange it with the United States authority. What is happening in the world is that that model is being globalized, or a multilateral arrangement involving over 120, 130 countries, where any person who is ordinarily resident in a particular jurisdiction, has tax residence, who is physically resident in a particular jurisdiction, but who is a tax resident of another jurisdiction, any accounts that that entity has in a country that's a member of the MAC Treaty, and as I said, there are over 120 odd countries that are members of MAC, the institutions of that are required to report on those accounts to the authorities in that country, and there will be an exchange of information. So any foreigner who has accounts in Jamaica, Jamaican authorities are required to report to those foreigners' jurisdiction, whether that be, all the countries are listed in the Act, who we will be required to report to, and in turn, who will report to Jamaican authorities. As with FACTA, Madam Speaker, the regulations also speak to the rules, administrative procedures, and compliance mechanisms of the Common Reporting Standard. The regulations include a list, which is subject to change, of all the participating and reporting jurisdictions of the Common Reporting Standard. So if you look at the back of the bill, Madam Speaker, you'll see the list under Part 1 of all the corresponding jurisdictions, and there's 102 here, including many of our Caribbean neighbors, Bahamas, Barbados, Bermuda, Grenada, etc., St. Lucia, St. Vincent, Trinidad, etc., as well as many other countries. And it also includes the list of reportable jurisdictions. This is a reflection of the multilateral scope of the Common Reporting Standard, as it reflects the parties who will be able to automatically share information with Jamaica, and for whose residents Jamaica will be obliged to exchange information automatically. The newly inserted fourth schedule contains a text of the MAC, which serves as the modern approach to administrative assistance, as countries are now able to engage on a multilateral basis with an instrument that is wider than the traditional double taxation agreements in scope, both in terms of tax types covered and modes of assistance available. Madam Speaker, there is a further amendment to the new third schedule in Regulation 2.6 of the Revenue Administration Regulations 2020, and the amendment is to correct a typographical error incurred during printing. Madam Speaker, there are also amendments to the relevant dates for the performance of due diligence obligations by financial institutions exchange in the new third schedule to provide a cohesive framework to facilitate exchanges beginning 2022. So, Madam Speaker, there have been amendments that have been tabled today, which we will take when we go to committee. And those amendments just deal with effective dates. And because we are introduced to the bill was originally drafted, from last year, but we delayed it with the consent or the knowledge of our international partners, just to ensure that financial institutions would be able to make the change. While we sensitize them, they'll be able to make, because you're going to have to change the forms that you have to sign, the due diligence forms, and so forth. So our intention is for this bill to be passed now, but to give sufficient time for the appointed day. Okay, so even though we pass it today and we can show our international partners that this is domestic law, we will have an appointed day that will facilitate financial institutions to update all of their forms, and for customers as well, for the awareness to percolate throughout the society. These amendments, in conclusion, Madam Speaker, to the Revenue Administration Act are intended to effect the policy to increase transparency and provide a safe place to do business in keeping with the global standard. Madam Speaker, as Jamaica moves towards its Vision 2030 goals, there's expected to be an increase in foreign investment. With this increase will come more cross-border transactions. It is therefore crucial that Jamaica has in place legislation and the ability and mechanisms to effectively appropriate the taxes due from this economic expansion. Although the move to the automatic exchange of information standard is relatively recent, it is already having a significant impact, Madam Speaker, by virtue of the number of countries that are signatories and the amounts of information that's been exchanged. Tens of millions of financial accounts have already been exchanged with a combined value of over 4.9 trillion euros. And the standard is said to have further contributed to the international community being able to earn additional revenues. Madam Speaker, Jamaica is a part of the international community. It's taken us a long stage to get here. We first signed on to the MAC in 2011, and there have been various steps of signing the treaty, ratifying the treaty, depositing the treaty in the place where it's to be deposited, and now we are moving to enacting the elements of the treaty, which is the Common Reporting Standard, into domestic law, as is required under our obligations. And Jamaica will be in keeping with how other countries around the world, including countries in our region, have moved. And so, in that vein, Madam Speaker, I commend the Act to amend the Revenue Administration Act. Oh, sorry, this is after. Oh, you'll do it today? Okay. So I amend the Act to the Honourable House for approval.
Madam Speaker.
What did I say? I commend the Act.
Madam Speaker, this is a major piece of legislation. It incorporates in the fourth schedule the Convention on Mutual Administrative Assistance in Tax Matters, which is, as the Minister has said, an attempt at a multilateral approach to dealing with the sharing of tax information, and is now well established in many jurisdictions. And in the second schedule, there are regulations set out which incorporate the provisions of that treaty into domestic law. It makes the legislation rather bulky because you have both the treaty itself and the regulations domesticating the treaty in the same piece of legislation, which is itself an amendment to the Revenue Administration Act. So the Revenue Administration Act is becoming a very, it's already a big piece of legislation, and it is going to be even bigger now. As the Minister said, this is something which has been in the making for some time, and it is really a trend which is irreversible because increasingly jurisdictions are expected to facilitate this form of common reporting. So we have no objection to this legislation, and I would just indicate that the opposition supports it. Madam Speaker, thank you.
Madam Speaker, thank the opposition leader for accommodating. I think appreciate that very much. Again, this is, living up to our international standards, and we have taken full advantage of the flexibility that's been offered by virtue of our track record to advise the business community and that this was coming. Over 2 years ago, we've had sessions to let people know, and table the act, gave enough, several months, and even further to that, we'll ensure that the appointed day gives more time as well for persons to fully understand. So, Madam Speaker, I ask that the act be approved after we go into committee with the amendments that have been tabled on the House. Huh? After second reading. Madam Speaker, I therefore ask that it be read a second time. Thank you.
The question before the House is that the bill be read a second time. Those in favour? Those against? The ayes have it.
Huh?
Yes.
A bill entitled An Act to Amend the Revenue Administration Act, read a second time.
The amendment. Yeah. Yes.
The House will now resolve itself into a committee of the whole House to consider the bill as a whole with the amendments. There are 28 amendments. May we agree all clauses together along with the 28 amendments? Thank you. Those in favour? So, okay. I now put clause is 1 to 7. Those in favour? Those against? And I now put clause 8 with the amendments, 28 amendments. Those in favour? Those against? The ayes have it. I put the title and the clause 8 as amended with 28 amendments, yes. I now put clause 8 with 28 amendments as amended. Those in favour? Those against? The ayes have it. I now put the title and the enacting clause. Those in favour? Those against? The pledge forms a part of clause 8. So. The question is that I do report the bill as having passed committee stage with 28 amendments. Those in favour? Those against? The ayes have it. Mr.
Madam Speaker, I now ask that the bill, Madam Speaker, I now ask that the bill be read a third time.
Those in favour? Those against? The ayes have it.
A bill entitled An Act to Amend the Revenue Administration Act, read a third time and passed.
Madam Speaker, the member who is chair of the Ethics Committee will now make the report.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, I now move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take the motions, notice of which I gave earlier. Madam Speaker, I now move that the motions, notice of which I gave earlier, be approved.
The question is that the motions, notices of which the Deputy Speaker gave earlier, be approved. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker, I gave notice with regards to the amendment of the standing orders, whereas Section 58 of the Integrity Act, Madam Speaker, requires that the standing order of the House of Representatives be amended to include the terms of reference to the Integrity Commission Oversight Committee as set out in Section 36 of the Act. Madam Speaker, the format of the requisite amendment to the standing order as prescribed in the fourth schedule of the Act includes an erroneous reference to Section 34 of the Act in lieu of the aforementioned Section 36. This error, Madam Speaker, was consequential and inadvertently reproduced in Standing Order 73D of the standing orders. And we therefore want to amend by removing the order 73DE and to remove, in essence, the incorrect reference in Section 34 of the Act and replace it, of course, with the appropriate Section 36. This, Madam Speaker, is not a contentious measure. It seeks, in fact, to give efficacy to the Oversight Committee, which is very necessary. That committee, Madam Speaker, needs to meet so as to receive the report from the Integrity Commission and consequential matters thereto. I therefore move that the appropriate amendment be made by deleting the word Section 34 and substituting thereof the word Section 36 of Standing Order 73D. May it please you, Madam Speaker.
The question, therefore, before the House is that the motion be referred to a committee, to a standing orders committee for their amendments.
Madam Speaker, I would have made the appropriate reference, but I gave opportunity for any comments from the other side before I close, and at the closure, I would make the reference.
This is an uncontroversial matter. Right. There was a clear error in the printing of the Act, where there was a wrong reference in the schedule, which amended the standing orders to the section which was 34, I think, which should have been 36. In the course of the deliberations of the Integrity Commission Oversight Committee earlier in the year, this was pointed out, and a decision was taken that it should be fixed, and this is what we're doing now. So we support it, ma'am.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I now make the reference that the matter be referred to the standing orders for appropriate handling. May it please you.
So the question is that the matter now stands referred to the Standing Orders Committee. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it.
Madam Speaker, it is not intended to do any further business today. And before I invite you to adjourn the House for the next sitting on the 17th of November, I'd like to advise members that this indeed is the last sitting in this Kenneth Rattray conference room, and wonderful. That we will revert.
All praises be to God.
We will revert to Gordon House for the next sitting of the House. Madam Speaker, may it please you, therefore, to adjourn the House until the next sitting on Tuesday, the 17th of November at William Gordon House at Duke Street.
The question before the House is that the House be adjourned until Tuesday, the 17th of November at the William Gordon House. Those in favor? Those against?